Chapter 718, The Shock Prodigies Present. Chu Yanran's terrifying strength. The people around Long Zhantian nodded in agreement after hearing his words. At the same time, you could see a look of shock in their eyes. Clearly, they had not anticipated that the Emperor's daughter would be so terrifying. Although everyone in the War God Palace or the War God Temple knows that the human Emperor has a daughter, but none of them expected that the Emperor's daughter would be so terrifying. You must know that the human Emperor's talent is the most terrifying existence. If his daughter is this terrifying, then his son's strength is probably not as simple as one might imagine. Thinking of this, everyone looked at the battle in the sky with a helpless expression. At this moment, those self-proclaimed top geniuses also looked at Chu Yanran with a sense of shock in their eyes. Take Jian Yunlong and others as an example. Their strength was already top tier. However, as the prodigies that emerge become stronger and stronger, so too do the challenges. They were gradually forgotten by everyone present. They've lost their former glory. Are these the true, peerless geniuses? They not only possess unparalleled talent and strength, but also the inheritance of emperor-level powerhouses that we cannot reach. At this moment, a prodigy sighed helplessly. He was a holy son of a holy land. At the same time, his eyes also showed a hint of envy and jealousy as he spoke. After all, in his view, Chu Yanran didn't need to come here to compete with them for the emperor's inheritance. After all, everyone knows that there are true emperor-level powerhouses in the Great Xia Empire. Moreover, there are legendary figures who surpass the level of emperors. Therefore, he did not believe that there was no imperial-level succession in the Great Xia Empire. It could even be said that if Chu Yanran, the daughter of the human emperor, wanted it, he could probably obtain even those legendary inheritances that surpass the level of the great emperor. Thinking of this, he naturally looked at Chu Yanran with a hint of envy and jealousy. Of course, not every top genius looked at Chu Yanran with envy and jealousy at this moment. Some of these prodigies had a thoughtful look in their eyes. After all, if one could get involved with Chu Yanran, then perhaps they can get promoted quickly. After all, the power within the Great Xia Empire far exceeded their imagination. Many of the stunningly beautiful women gazed at Chu Yanran with a gleam in their eyes. Of course, apart from them, the remaining ordinary geniuses were extremely shocked. Is this the princess of the Great Xia Empire? I had only heard of a princess in the Great Xia Empire before, but I had never heard of a princess in the Great Xia Empire being so powerful. The most talented person on our continent is the current human emperor. He is about the same age as us and has already broken through to the human emperor realm, so it is only natural that his daughter has such terrifying talent. I heard that the birth of the emperor's daughter and son caused strange phenomena in the heavens and earth. If his daughter is so terrifying, then what level of power does that prince of the Great Xia Empire possess? This time, the princess of the Great Xia Empire did not bring an army with her when she came out. It seems that she did not come directly from the Great Xia Empire, or that she came without alerting the Great Xia Empire. I really want to know just how powerful that eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire is. The other ordinary prodigies were all looking at Chu Yanran with envy. Of course, they all held Chu Fan, the most talented among them, in high esteem. After all, Chu Fan's talent wasn't just recognized by them. Moreover, Chu Fan is the human emperor of this era. Therefore, they naturally held the creator of the Great Xia Empire in high esteem. However, at this time, many prodigies were looking forward to the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire. After all, they all knew that the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire was named Chu Wushuang. The name comes from the phrase unparalleled in the world. Therefore, they were naturally convinced that Chu Wushuang's strength was definitely not as simple as they had imagined. After all, how could Chu Wushuang, who was born at the same time as Chu Yanran, be weak? The battle between Chu Yanran and this top genius from the Heavenly God Academy continued unabated. Terrifying fluctuations were felt throughout the entire sea area, as one terrifying aura after another clashed in the skies above the sea. The sky was also filled with countless laws of power. At this moment, Chu Yanran also gained the upper hand. The prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy, standing before him, was no weakling. However, compared to Chu Yanran, she is much weaker. Even now, it might not take Chu Yanran too long to kill the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy in front of her. Suddenly, a phoenix appeared behind Chu Yanran. The terrifying power shot directly at the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy in front of him. More importantly, the fire laws carried by this phoenix are also extremely terrifying. One terrifying fire law after another instantly bound the prodigy of the Heavenly God Academy before him. Although this prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy was still using the terrifying sword energy around him to defend himself. However, the sword energy on her body was instantly and completely bound by the law of fire. Then, the phoenix behind Chu Yanran landed directly on the body of this prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy. The terrifying force sent the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy flying. Then an even more terrifying force descended upon her. This caused the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy to be sent flying backwards instantly. At this moment, Chu Yanran clearly had no intention of letting go of this prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy. She quickly gripped the fiery red longsword in her hand. In an instant, it transformed into a fiery red streak of light, chasing after the prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy. At the same time, she left behind a deep flame law wherever she went. It was like a fiery red shooting star relentlessly chasing after this prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy. In the blink of an eye, Chu Yanran appeared in front of this prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy. Then, without the slightest hesitation, she thrust the fiery red long sword in her hand toward the prodigy of the Heavenly God Academy. A terrifying power instantly poured out from Chu Yanran's body. Then it landed directly on the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy. The geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy who witnessed this scene instantly showed a look of fear in their eyes. However, she quickly used the purple longsword in her hand to block this terrifying force. The two longswords collided instantly in the next second. The moment they collided, this prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy was directly blasted back by the terrifying force. Then, like a cannonball, it crashed directly into the sea below. Chapter 719, a purple figure appears, displaying terrifying strength and the resolute determination of the fiery, young Marshal Xian Yuanpa. Instantly, a huge wave formed on the sea surface. The prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy crashed directly into the deep sea like a cannonball. The surrounding seawater instantly enveloped her entire body. Upon seeing this, Chu Yanran did not hesitate at all and slashed her sword at the sea again. A terrifying, fiery red vermilion bird instantly appeared behind her. Then Suzaku seemed to be carrying a raging inferno. The terrifying force completely evaporated the surrounding seawater. Then, without stopping for a moment, it headed down into the depths of the ocean. This vermilion bird seemed unafraid of the surrounding seawater. They attacked directly towards the prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy deep in the sea. The terrifying force caused the surrounding seawater to flow backward. Even a lot of seawater made way for this vermilion bird. The vermilion bird, carrying terrifying sword energy, did not hesitate at all and went straight for the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy. Upon witnessing this scene, the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy showed a hint of fear in his eyes. However, she quickly pulled out a purple jade pendant from her waist. Then, without the slightest hesitation, she crushed the purple jade pendant in her hand to pieces. The next second, the purple jade pendant instantly transformed into a purple light, enveloping her entirely. The purple light quickly formed a purple human figure. The purple figure merely waved its hand lightly, and the terrifying sword energy completely dissipated into the world. Moreover, even the vermilion bird was completely annihilated by his large hand. The purple figure then fully appeared before everyone. It turned out he was a middle-aged man exuding a terrifying aura. The middle-aged man pointed slightly forward. Then you can see that the surrounding seawater has been restored directly here. At the same time, the woman from the Heavenly God Academy was also directly brought back to the sky by his terrifying power. After the middle-aged man finished doing all this, he slowly turned his gaze to Chu Yanran in front of him. "I really dislike the bloodline in your veins." Then his voice, like a thunderclap, swept towards Chu Yanran, while the purple light around him completely enveloped the entire world. A gigantic hand suddenly appeared in the sky and pressed down towards Chu Yanran. More importantly, this enormous hand also carried an aura far exceeding that of an ordinary great sage. Upon seeing this scene, Chu Yanran's eyes instantly turned serious. However, she did not back down at all at this moment. Instead, he held the sword with both hands. A fiery red light instantly emanated from his body. Then a pale golden light appeared around her, protecting her completely. A pale golden phoenix instantly appeared behind Chu Yanran. This pale golden phoenix was not as terrifying as the phoenix that Chu Fan had unleashed. However, it far exceeded the pressure that a phoenix at the Great Sage Realm could unleash. Then, the purple palm in the sky collided instantly with the pale golden phoenix. At the moment of impact, the entire sky seemed to be completely annihilated by this terrifying force. At the same time, Xian Yuanpa and Chu Chun, who were engaged in a fierce battle, were also completely stopped in their actions by this terrifying power. Both of them looked at Chu Yanran with worried expressions. At this moment, the two could naturally sense that the purple figure was emanating an aura that far exceeded their expectations. The two then exchanged a glance. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he went straight to Chu Yanran's side. As for the pale golden phoenix above Chu Yanran's head, it had disappeared at this time. Of course, along with the pale golden phoenix, the purple hand in the sky also disappeared. She stared at the purple figure with a very serious look in her eyes. Does Your Excellency intend to become a complete enemy of my Xianyuan family and the Great Xia Empire? When Xian Yuanpa saw his idol's daughter being bullied, he naturally stood up without hesitation, even though he knew he was no match for the figure. But now he naturally had no hesitation whatsoever. After all, he was the young marshal of the fiery army. As soon as Xian Yuanpa finished speaking, the fiery legion not far behind him arrived directly beside him. This army was not particularly powerful. However, they now naturally intend to stand on Chu Yanran's side. After all, they already had a close relationship with the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, they naturally wouldn't hesitate now. At this moment, Chu Chun stepped forward, his supreme bone emanating a terrifying aura. His eyes were filled with murderous intent as he looked at the purple figure in the sky. After all, the purple figure had just tried to attack his niece. So how could he possibly give up now? Suddenly, a terrifying time law emanated from the supreme bone on his chest. Then a terrifying aura descended from the sky. However, this terrifying aura was insignificant to the purple figure. He simply clapped his hands lightly, and the terrifying aura vanished completely. Then he slowly turned his gaze to the people in front of him. Isn't there an irreconcilable conflict between my Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire? Then he gave a disdainful smile before slowly speaking. After saying that, he pointed again in the direction of Chu Yanran. A terrifying finger instantly appeared across the entire sky. It was as if it wanted to completely crush all living beings and all things. Everyone who saw this enormous finger was filled with shock, because at this moment they could feel that the power of this finger was now irresistible. All the geniuses present stared at the purple figure with shock and disbelief. At the same time, a sense of worry instantly arose in their hearts. They didn't believe that Chu Yanran, the princess of the Great Xia Empire, came here without bringing with her top experts from the Great Xia Empire. If the powerful figures of the Great Xia Empire were to engage in a fierce battle with this purple figure, then this imperial succession would likely be lost. These prodigies are not the only ones who share this idea. Even the 4 young masters of the demonic sect and the demon prince of the demonic sect looked at this scene with solemn expressions. At this moment, Chu Chen's face showed a hint of worry. However, he also knew that the powerful figures of the Great Xia Empire should be making their move soon. Therefore, he looked at the purple figure with a murderous intent. Chapter 7:20 The Golden Shilin Chariot makes its appearance. Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu, both at the Great Emperor realm, arrive. Although Chu Yanran felt a sense of helplessness as she sensed this terrifying power, she knew that she no longer had a chance to make a move. Therefore, she had no choice but to entrust her safety to the experts of their Great Xia Empire. Just when everyone thought that the top experts of the Great Xia Empire would make a move, a very domineering voice suddenly came from the sky. How dare you lay a hand on my younger sister? You are truly insolent. Although the voice was very domineering, you could also hear a hint of concern in it. As soon as the sound came, a violent noise suddenly erupted from the sky. Then, a long spear, silver-white with a streak of gold, flashed across the sky. Then it directly blocked the giant finger in the sky. Then a general dressed in a silver-white robe appeared in front of Chu Yanran. The aura emanating from this general has reached the level of an emperor. At the same time, he looked at the purple figure in front of him with a hint of anger on his face. Just as the general in the silver-white robe appeared, a mighty aura once again swept across the sky. Then, the sky behind them seemed to be completely torn apart by a terrifying force. The next second, a golden torrent appeared instantly from the sky and earth behind them. The next second, a golden Qilin appeared before everyone. Then, a golden chariot pulled by a golden Qilin appeared in everyone's sight. As the golden chariot appeared, everyone could clearly see the golden army surrounding it. Every soldier in the golden army has reached the great sage realm. The aura they exuded was terrifying. The aura emanating from the soldiers at the very front had even reached the quasi-emperor level. Meanwhile, the golden Qilin chariot was rapidly approaching from afar. At the same time, standing directly in front of the golden Qilin chariot was a young man dressed in a purple battle robe and holding a halberd. The aura emanating from him was also extremely terrifying. Under the incredulous gazes of everyone, the young man, dressed in a purple battle robe and wielding a halberd, leaped high into the air with a look of anger in his eyes. The next second, the halberd in his hand shot like a purple meteor, heading straight for the purple figure in the sky. The terrifying power directly pierced through the surrounding space and time. The power carried by the halberd landed directly on the purple figure. Upon seeing this, the purple-clad figure's calm gaze instantly turned to one of shock. However, he still managed to catch this terrifying attack quickly. However, he was blasted back several thousand meters by this terrifying attack. At the same time, his hands were trembling uncontrollably. Upon seeing this, the figure in the purple battle robe in front of the Qilin chariot quickly landed next to the general in the silver-white battle robe. At the same time, he caught his own halberd. Then he slowly spoke to the general beside him, who was dressed in a silver-white battle robe. Zilong, we need to teach this kind of person a lesson, otherwise he'll really think that our great Xia Empire has no one left. His voice, like the tolling of a bell, echoed throughout the sky, and he casually patted the young man in the silver-white battle robe. The man in the silver-white battle robe is none other than Zhao Zilong, the White Horse General of the Great Xia Empire. During this period, he also successfully broke through to the Great Emperor realm inside the Time Pagoda. Of course, he wasn't the only one who broke through to the Great Emperor realm. Even Lu Bu, who was standing next to him wielding a halberd, had successfully broken through to the Great Emperor realm. This time, upon hearing that their eldest prince was going out for training, the two followed him without hesitation. Upon discovering that his princess had been bullied, Zhao Zilong naturally couldn't help but take action. Just after Lu Bu finished speaking, at this moment, the golden Qilin chariot slowly arrived in front of Chu Yanran. Then, without any surprise, the golden chariot came to a stop between heaven and earth. The moment everyone saw the golden Qilin chariot, their eyes were filled with curiosity. Many of these prodigies couldn't hide the admiration in their eyes at all, because they naturally knew that this golden Qilin chariot was the chariot of the current human emperor. The current emperor once drove a golden Qilin chariot to the central region to avenge his brother. The emperor at that time was in high spirits, although the human emperor at that time did not achieve the realm of human emperor. However, it was from that time that the cultivators of the central region remembered the human emperor's Qilin chariot. Therefore, they had already made some guesses as soon as the Qilin chariot appeared. They knew, of course, that the voice they had just heard did not belong to the human emperor. Therefore, they all guessed that the person sitting inside the Qilin chariot must be the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire. Everyone who thought about this looked towards the direction of the Qilin chariot with a hint of curiosity. Even Xian Yuanpa's eyes revealed a look of curiosity. However, when he saw Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu beside him, Xian Yuanpa's eyes were filled with excitement. He had naturally heard of Zhao Zilong, the White Horse Silver Spear, and Lu Bu, the demon god descending to earth. These two have followed the current emperor from the very beginning. They have now become powerful figures of the great emperor level. Therefore, Xian Yuanpa was naturally very much looking forward to whether he could grow to that level by then. Therefore, it can be said that both Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu were objects of Xian Yuanpa's admiration. Besides Xian Yuanpa, there are naturally many people who admire Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu. After all, the two of them were top-tier experts. He was also one of the top generals of the Great Xia Empire. Those ambitious young men who dreamed of conquering battlefields naturally admired them greatly. Of course, what everyone was more curious about at this moment was the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire inside the Qilin chariot. Even the holy sons and daughters of those holy lands looked at the Qilin chariot with curiosity in their eyes. Under the curious gazes of the crowd, the golden light inside the Qilin chariot slowly dissipated. Then, a young man dressed in golden armor slowly stepped out of the Qilin chariot. A golden, long sword hung at his waist. A gentle smile appeared on his lips. He has a phoenix mark on his forehead, just like the current emperor. However, one can sense a significant difference between the aura emanating from him and that of a phoenix. His emperor armor was even modeled after his father's emperor armor. If you look closely, you can see that the phoenix on this emperor's armor has also turned into a real dragon. Chu Wushuang changed the phoenix on the human emperor armor to a real dragon because of his physical condition. Chapter 721, Chu Wushuang's Orders, an excited Lu Bu, and the Great Emperor's battle resumes. Although Chu Wushuang looked at Chu Yanran with a gentle gaze, those who knew him well could sense that the terrifying aura within Chu Wushuang was being constantly suppressed. Clearly, he was extremely angry with his top expert from the Heavenly God Academy. Then, Chu Wushuang leisurely looked at Chu Chun in front of her. Wushuang greets Imperial Uncle. Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran address Chu Chun differently. Although Chu Chun is indeed the Prince of Jinbei now, Chu Wushuang still calls him Imperial Uncle. Actually, to be most accurate, he should address Chu Chun as Imperial Uncle. However, as the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire, he naturally addressed Chu Chun as Imperial Uncle. Wushuang, I didn't expect you to come too. After hearing Chu Wushuang's words, Chu Chun waved his hand and looked at Chu Wushuang with a hint of surprise. He never expected that his nephew would come here. You should know that this nephew of mine rarely goes out. I never expected that this small emperor's secret realm would allow my nephew to come out of Chang'an City. As the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire, Wu Shuang naturally has to share some of the affairs of the Great Xia Empire with his father. Now it is time to let the world know that the geniuses of our Great Xia Empire are not as simple as they imagine. After hearing his words, Chu Wuxuang waved his hand and then looked directly at the group of geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy. At the same time, a murderous intent appeared in his eyes. Although Chu Wuxuang usually appears to be very gentle, but no matter what, he is still the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire. Moreover, his personality is somewhat similar to Chu Fan's. Therefore, when he looked at the group of students from the Heavenly God Academy in front of him, the killing intent in his eyes was completely undisguised. After all, the Heavenly God Academy and their Great Xia Empire were mortal enemies. What's more, this top expert from the Heavenly God Academy just tried to kill his sister here. Having thought this through, Chu Wuxuang naturally showed no mercy whatsoever. General Zilong, General Lu Bu, anyone who dares to lay a hand on my Great Xia Empire's princess will be executed without mercy. Then Chu Wuxuang's voice rang out softly. After he finished speaking, he stood between heaven and earth like a true human emperor. The terrifying aura emanating from his body was released immediately. At the same time, he looked at Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu with a commanding gaze. Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu were originally top generals of the Great Xia Empire. As one of the future heirs of the Great Xia Empire, Chu Wuxuang was naturally seen as the future successor of the Great Xia Empire by these generals, because everyone is grooming Chu Wuxuang to be the heir to the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, upon hearing Chu Wuxuang's command, they immediately turned their gaze to the purple figure from the Heavenly God Academy in front of them, especially Lu Bu, whose eyes now revealed a madness. Lu Bu was originally a very warlike figure in the Great Xia Empire. Now that he has broken through to the Great Emperor realm, he is even more eager to fight against top experts. The purple figure in front of them was at the Great Emperor level. Therefore, he naturally couldn't miss such an opportunity. Your humble servant obeys. Then, Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong simultaneously bowed to Chu Wuxuang. The next second, Lu Bu, wielding his halberd, charged directly towards the top expert from the Heavenly God Academy. The strength of this Emperor-level expert from the Heavenly God Academy has reached the mid-stage of Emperor level. However, Lu Bu showed no sign of worry at this moment. On the contrary, they were extremely excited. A terrifying black aura instantly appeared on his halberd. At the same time, he fell directly from the sky, as if he were a god or a demon. The terrifying power headed directly towards the Emperor-level expert from the Heavenly God Academy. Although this powerful Emperor from the Heavenly God Academy was a projection. However, his true strength is definitely no weaker than that of a late-stage Great Emperor. Therefore, the projected version of him already showed that his strength had reached the mid-stage of the Great Emperor realm. Upon seeing Lu Bu, a general of the Great Xia Empire in its early stages, launch an attack against him, an awkward expression instantly appeared on his face. Then, a terrifying aura instantly emanated from his body. Inside the palace of the Heavenly God Academy, a silvery white light was also flashing by. The silvery white light quickly transformed into a celestial sword, appearing in the hand of this top expert from the Heavenly God Academy. Then, the immortal sword in his hand swiftly clashed with the halberd in Lu Bu's hand. The entire sky shook violently at the moment of impact. It was as if this entire sea area had been completely shattered by this terrifying force. Upon witnessing this, Zhao Zilong naturally stepped forward. The terrifying aura emanating from him instantly held up the sky. This allowed the group of geniuses under the sky to finally breathe a sigh of relief. Otherwise, their attack would have killed all the geniuses present. Go fight in the outer realms. Don't let a battle here affect His Highness and the princess. After doing all this, Zhao Zilong raised his head and looked in the direction of Lu Bu. After he finished speaking, his aura instantly enveloped Chu Wuxuang and the others. This made the surrounding atmosphere very thick. Chu Wuxuang and the others stood steadily under the sky. Lu Bu chuckled after hearing Zhao Zilong's words. Then, he was seen holding a halberd and heading directly towards the outer realm. Upon witnessing this scene, the powerful Emperor-level expert from the Heavenly God Academy did not hesitate at all and followed Lu Bu's footsteps towards the outer realm. The oppressive feeling in the surrounding space disappeared instantly. All the prodigies finally breathed a sigh of relief upon witnessing this scene. For a fleeting moment, they even felt as if the entire world was about to be destroyed by this terrifying power. Therefore, after the two top experts left, a hint of lingering fear naturally appeared in their eyes. At the same time, he looked in the direction of Zhao Zilong with a hint of relief in his eyes. If it weren't for Zhao Zilong, they would probably be dead by now. General Zilong, you should also go and help General Lu Bu and quickly resolve this great battle. Chu Wushuang looked at Lu Bu and the great emperor-level expert from the Heavenly God Academy who had already appeared outside the domain, and slowly spoke to Zhao Zilong beside him. Although Chu Wushuang also believed that Lu Bu could defeat the emperor-level expert from the Heavenly God Academy, if Zhao Zilong were added, they could take down this emperor-level expert much faster. Chapter 722 Chu Wushuang's Eye of Destiny, the Extraordinary Emperor's Inheritance. After hearing Chu Wushuang's words, Zhao Zilong still wanted to stay here to protect Chu Wushuang and the others. But the thought that both Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran were protected by two top-tier experts came to mind. Zhao Zilong then bowed respectfully to Chu Wushuang. Without the slightest hesitation, it transformed into a streak of silvery white light and headed straight for the battlefield where Lu Bu and his men were. In an instant, the oppressive aura of the emperor-level powerhouses above the entire sky vanished. After doing all this, Chu Wushuang slowly turned her gaze to all the geniuses present. However, wherever his gaze fell, all the geniuses around him lowered their heads. Clearly, none of them dared to meet the gaze of the eldest prince of the great Xia Empire. Finally, Chu Wushuang turned his gaze to the several prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy. The top geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy had already reached the early stage of the Great Saint Realm. Of course, the cultivation level of a great sage in the early stage is nothing in front of Chu Wushuang. After all, Chu Wushuang has already reached the late stage of the Great Sage Realm. However, Chu Wushuang did not make a move at this time. Instead, he leisurely turned his gaze to the distance. At this moment, he could sense the aura emanating from this great emperor's legacy. Then, a look of surprise appeared in his eyes, because he inherited the destiny of the great Xia Empire. Therefore, with his eye of fortune, Chu Wushuang can now discover that the great emperor's inheritance here is not as simple as he imagined, because he could see that the fortune emanating from this emperor's inheritance far exceeded that of the emperor himself. It should be noted that even the fortune of a living emperor-level powerhouse is not this terrifying. Therefore, the lineage of the great emperor here is probably far beyond their imagination. Thinking of this, a hint of curiosity appeared in Chu Wushuang's eyes. Then he waved his hand slightly towards the void. The next second, a terrifying figure slowly emerged from the void. The figure exuded a terrifying aura. The owner of this figure is none other than the great, accomplished sacred body. As a great, accomplished sacred body who has surpassed the great emperor realm, he can naturally sense the extraordinary nature of this great emperor's secret realm. Has your highness also noticed? Then he slowly walked to Chu Wushuang's side and spoke to her. After speaking, he looked solemnly in the direction of the great emperor's legacy, because at this moment, he could feel a pressure coming from the emperor's legacy here. The only force capable of putting pressure on him is at least at the level of a three-generation emperor. Therefore, this inheritance is not as simple as imagined. Indeed, it seems the inheritance of the great emperor here is not as simple as I imagined. After hearing what the great accomplished holy body said, Chu Wushuang nodded seriously and said, "After speaking, I look down at the direction that is radiating a lot of luck, because that is the direction from which the great emperor's legacy is passed down. Judging from the aura emanating from inside, the inheritor of this great emperor's legacy must have reached at least the level of a three-generation great emperor before his fall, and possibly even higher." After hearing Chu Wushuang's words, the great accomplished holy body nodded seriously, and then slowly looked towards the place where the fortune was emanating and said, Of course, what the great accomplished holy body saw was not the aura of fortune, but the terrifying aura emanating from it. Upon hearing the words of the great accomplished holy body, a look of surprise appeared in the eyes of everyone present. Of course, only the people of the great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family could hear Chu Wushuang and the great accomplished holy body's conversation. Others naturally could not hear it. At this moment, Xianyuan looked into the distance with a look of shock in his eyes. He hadn't expected the heritage here to be so extraordinary, although their Xianyuan family does indeed have an imperial-level lineage. Moreover, the lineage of each emperor-level figure is not weak. However, he did not expect that the heritage here had reached such a level. You should know that even the ancestor of this generation of the Xianyuan family, who is the most powerful emperor in the Xianyuan family, had only reached this level. If it truly is the legacy of such people, then the inheritance here is definitely not as simple as one might imagine. It seems that the inheritance here is not the so-called Great Emperor's inheritance. The Great Emperor's inheritance is just a guess by the cultivators on the continent. Chu Wushuang nodded and said, his eyes filled with anticipation. Of course, even if the inheritance here is the inheritance of the four great emperors, it is not particularly useful to Chu Wushuang. After all, Their Great Xia Empire has experts at the Red Dust Immortal realm. Moreover, there's also a top-tier expert at the true immortal level. Therefore, it was naturally very easy for him to obtain a legacy that surpassed that of an emperor. Chu Yanran became even more curious after hearing what Chu Wushuang and the great accomplished Holy Body said. He also wanted to see what kind of tradition was being passed down here. Just as Chu Wushuang and the great accomplished Holy Body were discussing the inheritance this time, everyone present, or rather, all the geniuses present, turned their gazes toward Chu Wushuang. Many of the prodigies had excited expressions in their eyes. Of course, some of the prodigies also had eyes filled with admiration. After all, this is the offspring of the human emperor they admire most. Moreover, he bears a striking resemblance to the human emperor they most admire. The same domineering nature, the same confidence, the same gentleness. I never expected that this imperial succession would allow me to meet the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire. It's truly unbelievable. More importantly, can you sense the aura emanating from the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire? Although his aura was only released for a moment, I can feel that his aura is definitely superior to that of the three top geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy. If the princess of the Great Xia Empire is so powerful, how could the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire be any less so? Yes, if the strength of this eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire were simple, then why would people call him His Highness, the Peerless Prince? I never expected to actually meet this Peerless Prince today, and such a domineering one at that. The group of prodigies present began to discuss this Peerless Prince, and their admiration for him remained undiminished. Some of the prodigies even felt that Chu Wushuang's strength far surpassed that of all the other prodigies present, although he only demonstrated his strength for a fleeting moment. However, these geniuses could also sense that Chu Wushuang's aura was no weaker than that of the three top geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy. It should be noted that the three top geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy have all reached the Great Saint Realm. Chapter 723, the trump card of the three geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy, the Immortal Trapping Array. Therefore, Chu Wushuang's strength must have reached the Great Sage Realm. Moreover, he is among the top beings in the Great Sage Realm. Otherwise, his aura wouldn't be so terrifying. Of course, it's not just these ordinary prodigies who are paying attention to Chu Wushuang now. Even the holy sons and daughters of the various holy lands turned their gazes toward Chu Wushuang, because at this moment, they could feel the extremely oppressive aura emanating from Wushuang. Is this the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire? As expected of the peerless Prince Wushuang, his strength probably far surpasses that of the geniuses of this era. Jian Yunlong from the Heavenly Sword Holy Land looked at Chu Wushuang with a solemn expression and said, his eyes filled with admiration. Jian Yunlong already held the emperor of the Great Xia Empire in high esteem. Therefore, when he sensed Chu Wushuang's aura, a look of admiration naturally appeared in his eyes. Although the strength of this peerless prince has exceeded our expectations, as the peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire, it is only natural that he is so strong. After all, his father is the current emperor. The Holy Maiden of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land standing next to Jian Yunlong slowly stepped forward and spoke. Although this Holy Maiden of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land did not expect that Chu Wushuang's strength had reached such a terrifying level. But when she thought about how Chu Wushuang's father was the current emperor, she felt it was normal. After all, how could the offspring of the current emperor be so simple? Is this the offspring of the one who has been called an unparalleled prodigy for several eras? His strength has actually reached this level. It seems we cannot let him continue to grow. Meanwhile, the top prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy slowly looked in Chu Wushuang's direction and spoke, his eyes revealing a lively expression. Clearly, he hadn't expected Chu Wushuang's strength to have reached such a level. Although we can't watch Chu Wushuang continue to grow like this, how can we completely eliminate him now? Another great sage-level prodigy, standing beside this top prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy, also frowned and spoke. Although he didn't want to see Chu Wushuang of the Great Xia Empire continue to grow. However, no matter what, Chu Wushuang of the Great Xia Empire was stronger than them. Therefore, it is basically impossible for them to defeat Chu Wushuang. Upon hearing his words, the other two top geniuses in the Heavenly God Academy also showed a hint of helplessness in their eyes. Although the Heavenly God Academy was also unwilling to watch Chu Wushuang grow up. However, the three most outstanding geniuses in their Heavenly God Academy are these three. All three of them knew in their hearts that they could not truly kill Chu Wushuang unless they reveal their trump card. Of course, their so-called trump card is summoning top-tier powerhouses. For example, the great emperor-level powerhouse summoned by that woman from the Heavenly God Academy just now. However, they were able to summon the great emperor-level powerhouses from the Heavenly God Academy to this place. the Great Xia Empire was still able to bring along its top emperor-level powerhouses. After all, on the surface, the strength of the Great Xia Empire was in no way inferior to that of their Heavenly God Academy. Therefore, the only way for them to deal with Chu Wuxuang now is through their own methods. It's impossible to rely on these top-tier experts. After all, the top experts of the Great Xia Empire would not stand by and watch their peerless prince be bullied by them. This emperor's inheritance might be an opportunity. After all, the ancestor said that emperor-level inheritances cannot allow experts above the emperor level to enter. Even those over 1,000 years old cannot enter this emperor's inheritance. So we naturally have a chance to deal with Chu Wuxuang here. After hearing their conversation, the woman from the Heavenly God Academy seemed to have thought of something and then spoke slowly. After all, their Heavenly God Academy has had its share of experts who have successfully broken through to the quasi-emperor realm over the past 1,000 years. In that case, it would be very easy for me to deal with the great sage Chu Wuxuang if a quasi-emperor level being entered into the secret realm. Although this method is indeed feasible, those quasi-emperors in the Great Xia Empire can also enter it. Another of the three prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy slowly stepped forward and spoke. Although it is true that quasi-emperors from their Heavenly God Academy can enter. However, even the quasi-emperors of the Great Xia Empire can enter. Therefore, the solution to Chu Wuxuang is still the same as the beginning. Don't forget that the three of us also have a formation. As long as we set up this formation in the secret realm, even a powerful expert at the quasi-emperor perfection realm will be weakened to the great saint realm in front of us. After hearing the words of this top prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy, the woman from the academy smiled slightly. Then, with a murderous glint in her eyes, she looked towards the direction of the Great Xia Empire and said, "Since she dared to say such things, she must have her own trump cards. You mean we should set up a trapping immortal formation in the secret realm? If that's the case, we can indeed kill the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire. However, we'll need the essence blood of many prodigies. Can we collect that much essence blood in a short time?" Upon hearing the woman's words, another top prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy instantly showed a look of fear in his eyes. At the same time, he helplessly asked the woman from the Heavenly God Academy again. The three of them do indeed have such a trump card. However, this trump card is not as easy to come by as one might imagine. It would take the lifeblood of at least tens of thousands of geniuses to unleash this power. If that's really the case, then their only option is to take action against the prodigies within these holy lands. At that time, the entire Heavenly God Academy will offend the holy lands of the entire continent. This is not a situation that their Heavenly God Academy wants to see, although these holy sites on the mainland are not particularly powerful to their Heavenly God Academy. However, if the Heavenly God Academy were to face all the forces on the entire continent, then they really don't necessarily have a chance of winning. After all, besides these sacred sites on the continent, the Great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family were also watching over their Heavenly God Academy. Therefore, if the plan fails, their Heavenly God Academy will definitely be attacked by all forces on the continent. They're all dead people. How could they possibly know it was us who did it? Another top prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy stepped forward with a disdainful expression, saying that to him, the lives of these prodigies were as insignificant as ants. Chapter 724, a terrifying battle between two emperors, two figures who gave the emperors of the Heavenly God Academy a headache. The other two top geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy also understood after hearing what this top genius said. Then, the two of them nodded in unison to the prodigy who had just spoken. Clearly, the two of them now agreed with the suggestion of the prodigy who had just spoken. Then the prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy turned their gaze to the distance. Meanwhile, Chu Wuxuang from the Great Xia Empire calmly gazed at the three top geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy, although he could sense that the three prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy were plotting against him. But no matter what, he is still a top-tier expert. At the same time, his talent is also top-notch. He didn't believe he couldn't handle these so-called prodigies. More importantly, many of the troops he brought were able to enter the Emperor's secret realm. So why should he fear the schemes of these so-called prodigies from the Heavenly God Academy? Thinking of this, Chu Wuxuang turned her gaze to the sky. At that moment, Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong were engaged in a fierce battle with the top expert from the Heavenly God Academy in the sky. Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong were already incredibly powerful. Originally, it was just Lu Bu and the top expert from the Heavenly God Academy, but the battle between them was extremely fierce. More importantly, the aura of gods and demons emanating from Lu Bu was also extremely terrifying. This is the power emanating from his top-tier physique. At the same time, the force he unleashed with his halberd was terrifying. True Emperor-level powerhouses rarely utilize this power. After all, for powerful beings at the Emperor level, the power they wield is mostly the true power of laws. However, Lu Bu is not currently wielding the power of laws like other Emperor-level powerhouses. Instead, they directly unleash terrifying power. He fought a fierce battle against the top expert from the Heavenly God Academy in front of him using only his physical strength. Lu Bu now seems to possess the great perfection of the Holy Body or the great perfection of the Overlord Body, because only these two body types are truly known for their strength. However, what Lu Bu preferred was this explosive power, so he kept waving the halberd in his hand. The terrifying aura emanating from his body was constantly being released. The top-tier, Emperor-level expert from the Heavenly God Academy in front of him was also somewhat helpless. He kept using his silver sword to block Lu Bu's halberd. At the same time, he was constantly using his sword techniques to wear down Lu Bu's power. After all, if all of Lu Bu's power were to fall on him, then he would probably be blown away by this terrifying force. Even the person was unable to withstand this terrifying force. However, the average Zhao Zilong has no intention of giving him that chance. Zhao Zilong also exuded a terrifying aura. The dragon gallant silver spear in his hand seemed to come alive. They relentlessly attacked the great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy in front of them. As Zhao Zilong swiftly thrust his spear towards the great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy, terrifying power instantly filled the entire sky. At the same time, a golden phoenix instantly appeared behind Zhao Zilong. The golden phoenix, carrying towering flames, charged towards the great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy before it. Upon seeing this scene, the great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy was instantly shocked. Then he was seen flying back quickly. With a look of horror in his eyes, he swiftly slashed out with his sword in front of him. Then, a sword aura carrying immense power shot towards Zhao Zilong. The two terrifying forces collided the next second. The phoenix and the sword energy vanished into the sky and earth the instant they collided. Just as this top emperor of the Heavenly God Academy breathed a sigh of relief, Lu Bu's halberd slashed down in his direction again. A terrifying force once again rushed towards his body. He had just breathed a sigh of relief, but a hint of helplessness returned to his eyes. Then, he quickly transformed into a streak of light and disappeared into the sky. When he reappeared, he was tens of thousands of meters away from Lu Bu. However, how could Lu Bu possibly let go of this great emperor from the Heavenly God Academy at this point? He turned his halberd around again and charged directly at the emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. The terrifying power cleaved the surrounding void completely. He seemed oblivious to the passage of time around him. In the blink of an eye, they arrived in front of the great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. Then he swung his halberd directly down at the emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. Zhao Zilong did not hesitate at all when he saw this. The dragon gallant silver spear in his hand emitted a series of gunshots once more, and then he leaped high into the air. The next second, countless spears appeared behind him. These spears, like arrows, charged directly at the emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. A terrifying intent from the gun instantly filled the entire void. The powerful emperor-level expert from the Heavenly God Academy, who had not yet withstood Lu Bu's attack, then saw Zhao Zilong's attack. So, feeling utterly helpless, he waved again in the direction of the Heavenly God Academy. Then a terrifying sound came directly from the direction of the Heavenly God Academy. The next second, a terrifying cauldron instantly appeared above the head of the great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. An ancient aura instantly emanated from the cauldron. Then the ancient cauldron instantly blocked Lu Bu's attack. The emperor of the Heavenly God Academy, however, transformed into a beam of sword light and vanished without trace. Only an ancient, simple cauldron remains in the sky. Upon seeing this, Zhao Zilong immediately turned his spear around. He transformed into a giant silver-white dragon and chased after the silver-white sword light. The terrifying dragon exuded a chilling aura of gunfire. Upon seeing this, Lu Bu wanted to retract his halberd. However, at this moment he felt a terrifying force dragging him down. Without hesitation, Lu Bu threw a punch directly at the large cauldron in front of him. His terrifying aura erupted directly. At the same time, the terrifying power shattered the surrounding void the instant it collided with the cauldron. Lu Bu was also directly blasted backward by this terrifying aura, and this large cauldron was also sent flying backwards. Then it transformed into a beam of light and chased after the direction of the great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. Upon seeing this, a playful smile appeared in Lu Bu's eyes. At the same time, the aura emanating from his body, which was like that of a god or demon, was completely unleashed. The next second, he transformed into a purple streak of light and disappeared into the sky, wielding his halberd. Chapter 725 The Supreme Emperor Weapon Shatters. Zhao Zilong's terrifying strength. Zhao Zilong was also extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of the great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. Then, the spear in his hand clashed with the long sword in the hand of the great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. At the moment of collision, a silver-white river and a purple river instantly appeared in the sky. Two long rivers appeared in the sky beyond the realm, as if they were rivers of time. At the same time, Zhao Zilong represents the silvery white river, and this great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy represents this long purple river. The two terrifying forces continued to collide. As these two terrifying forces continued to collide, at this moment, Lu Bu also arrived at the center of the battlefield. He once again charged at the emperor of the Heavenly God Academy with his halberd. However, his halberd had not yet come into contact with the great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. The large cauldron reappeared before him. Anger instantly flashed across Lu Bu's face. He then recklessly charged straight at the giant cauldron of the Heavenly God Academy. Break it! At the same time, the sound resounded throughout the entire sky. The next second, the halberd in his hand collided with the large cauldron. The terrifying shockwaves from the collision instantly annihilated the surrounding void. At the same time, the halberd in Lu Bu's hand was also trembling. Of course, most importantly, the large cauldron in front of him was also emitting a terrifying light at this moment. A crack also appeared in the very center of the cauldron. This shows just how terrifying Lu Bu's attack was. Meanwhile, the crack in the center of the cauldron was still spreading. Seeing this, Lu Bu's eyes lit up with excitement. Then, he once again wielded his halberd and launched an attack on the large cauldron in front of him. He is now clearly determined to fight this great cauldron to the death. Then we saw him repeatedly smashing the halberd in his hand onto the cauldron. A terrifying force collided with the cauldron in an instant. In just a short time, numerous cracks appeared on the cauldron. Seeing this, Lu Bu became even more excited and continued to smash the large cauldron in front of him with his halberd. Lu Bu was very confident that he could easily deal with this large cauldron. Of course, when the great emperor of the Heavenly God Academy saw this scene, his eyes were filled with disbelief and fear. He never expected that his supreme imperial weapon would be so ineffective in front of Lu Bu. At the same time, there was a hint of worry in his eyes. If Lu Bu had dealt with his ultimate imperial weapon, so next, I will have to face Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong. It's important to know that both Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong were top-tier individuals. So now he's starting to feel some regret. He regretted his actions. However, even if he didn't intervene at that time, there was nothing he could do. After all, the woman from the Heavenly God Academy was his offspring. Therefore, he naturally could not allow that woman from the Heavenly God Academy to perish. At this moment, Zhao Zilong seized the moment when the Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy was distracted and thrust out his Dragon Gallant Silver Spear. Then, the Dragon Gallant Silver Spear, carrying terrifying power, pierced directly through the shoulder of the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. Then, in an instant, a bloody hole appeared on the shoulder of the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. The great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy finally realized what was happening. He looked at Zhao Zilong with a hint of anger in his eyes. He thrust out his long sword. A terrifying force swept directly towards Zhao Zilong. Upon seeing this, Zhao Zilong quickly retreated. However, the Dragon Gallant Silver Spear in his hand launched another terrifying attack, clashing with the Earth Sword of the Heavenly God Academy. The two terrifying forces instantly created an aura of utter despair. Then the two of them were sent flying backwards at the same time. Zhao Zilong did not have any major injuries. Instead, he looked at the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy with great calmness and indifference. The Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy wore an expression of anger and resentment. He never expected that Zhao Zilong could actually hurt him. Then, in a fit of rage, he slashed his sword towards the sky. Terrifying sword energy once again filled the entire sky. At the same time, he charged directly towards Zhao Zilong. Zhao Zilong did not hesitate at all when he saw this scene. A giant dragon appeared behind him again in an instant. At the same time, he became one with the spear in his hand. He is now one with his gun. Then, a terrifying aura shot directly toward the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. With two terrifying collisions, Zhao Zilong and the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy were sent flying backwards. At this moment, Zhao Zilong's face remained expressionless. However, it can be seen that half of the silver armor on the corner of his clothes has been destroyed. However, thanks to the silver armor protecting him from the damage, he is currently unharmed. Meanwhile, the right arm of the Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy opposite him was severed. This made his right arm look empty. More importantly, the Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy had a look of disbelief in his eyes. Clearly, he hadn't expected Zhao Zilong's strength to be so terrifying. Meanwhile, the Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy was still looking at the scene with disbelief in his eyes. Just then, a cracking sound came from the sky not far away beside him. The next second, the supreme imperial weapon, radiating a strong imperial aura, began to slowly shatter. The ancient-looking cauldron was shattered under Lu Bu's attack. Lu Bu, on the other hand, had an excited expression on his face. At the same time, the aura of gods and demons emanating from his entire body was extremely terrifying. He quickly finished dealing with the large cauldron in front of him. Then, with a hint of anger in his eyes, he looked at the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy in front of him. Without the slightest hesitation, he charged directly at the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy with his halberd. The great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy used his only remaining arm to wield a long sword and defend against Lu Bu's attack. At the same time, he was using his divine sense to mobilize his physical body within the Heavenly God Academy. After all, this body of his was merely a clone he created using his own essence and blood. Therefore, the strength of his physical body is naturally not as great as that of his original body. More importantly, he has no other way to save this clone except for his main body. After all, losing a clone would significantly weaken his strength. Therefore, he naturally could not allow this clone to completely perish at the hands of Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu. Chapter 726, Slaying the Emperor's Avatar. The Great Perfection Holy Body unleashes a domineering move. But how could Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu possibly given that chance at this point? Upon seeing Lu Bu attack the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy, Zhao Zilong did not hesitate at all and launched an attack directly on the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. The dragon gallant silver spear in his hand once again exuded a terrifying aura. At that moment, he seemed to become one with the spear in his hand. With a powerful and undeniable aura, it charged directly at the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy before it. Then, these two terrifying forces clashed directly with the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy once again. The next second, Zhao Zilong's spear pierced through the chest of the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. Lu Bu's halberd was blocked by the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. Even so, the dragon gallant silver spear stuck in his chest made his eyes begin to dim. Of course, the main body inside the Heavenly God Academy also sensed the changes here. Then a purple figure flew out from the Heavenly God Academy. The purple figure carried an aura of terror. Of course, more importantly, the anger within that terrifying aura was extremely difficult to conceal. Clearly, the purple figure was extremely angry at this moment. Just as Zhao Zilong's spear pierced through the Heavenly God Academy's great Emperor clone, the true great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy also spat out a mouthful of blood. "How dare you destroy my clone?" Then his voice, filled with anger, came from afar. Clearly, his clone had been completely destroyed by Zhao Zilong at this point. So at this moment, he appeared extremely angry. Upon hearing his voice, Lu Bu did not hesitate at all. He once again swung his halberd and completely severed the head of the clone. Then, with a hint of provocation in his eyes, he looked into the distance. As for Zhao Zilong, he slowly put away his spear. It was as if he hadn't actually thrown that shot. Just as the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy was about to approach Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu, an even more terrifying and powerful aura emanated from afar. The next second, a golden palm appeared in the sky. A terrifying aura instantly swept towards the Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. Before the Emperor, who had just been discharged from the hospital, could react, he was slapped down by a golden palm. The terrifying force sent him flying before he could even react. At the same time, a huge dent appeared on his chest. At this moment, the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy finally realized what was happening. He knew that this was the work of one of the top experts of the Great Xia Empire. So he looked at Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu with a hint of resentment in his eyes. After taking one look, he transformed into a streak of light and headed towards the Heavenly God Academy. Clearly, the top expert from the Great Xia Empire had only given him a warning. If he dares to actually make a move, he will definitely perish here this time. This is why the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy left without the slightest hesitation. The person who just made the move was none other than the great city holy body of the Great Xia Empire. Although Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong were indeed quite strong. However, it was still somewhat difficult for them to kill this late-stage great Emperor from the Heavenly God Academy. Moreover, now is not the time for Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu to fight against this powerful late-stage Emperor from the Heavenly God Academy, because the great Emperor's secret realm is about to open. Therefore, this Great Xia Empire's great accomplished holy body naturally did not intend to waste time. This is also why he chose to take action. The moment the Great Xia Empire's great accomplished holy body made his move, all the top experts, whether in the Forbidden Zone or the Heavenly God Academy, opened their eyes. At this moment, the three top experts in the Heavenly God Academy, also known as the three absolutes of the Heavenly God Academy, all turned their gazes toward the direction where the great accomplished holy body was located. You can see the disbelief in their eyes. How is this possible? He has successfully broken through to this level in less than a few decades. What secret does the Great Xia Empire have that allowed him to break through so quickly? Tianjue looked incredulously in the direction of the great accomplished holy body and spoke. It should be noted that the last time they saw the great accomplishment holy body, its strength was only at the stage of alternative enlightenment. And now the great accomplishment sacred body has actually reached this level. He actually surpassed the level of an ordinary great emperor and reached the level of a first-generation great emperor. If the great perfection holy body can reach this level, it means that it's only a matter of time before he breaks through to a higher realm. Moreover, it seems that time is not particularly important to the Great Xia Empire. The other two of the three masters were also extremely shocked after hearing Tianjue's words. It takes at least tens of thousands of years to go from an alternative path to becoming a great emperor, but this minister of the Great Xia Empire has reached this level in just over 10 years. Could it be that there's a passage connecting the Great Xia Empire to other worlds? At this moment, Diju slowly raised his head and looked in the direction of the Great Xia Empire, saying, at the same time, he also had some guesses in his mind. However, if that's really the case, then the Great Xia Empire that their Heavenly God Academy will have to face will be extremely terrifying. There might even be beings at the true immortal realm within the Great Xia Empire that their Heavenly God Academy will face. If the Great Xia Empire does not have a passage to other worlds, then the Great Xia Empire must have a time-reversing artifact that can reverse time. Only in this way can the top experts of the Great Xia Empire grow so quickly. Wu Ju then gazed leisurely in the direction of the Great Xia Empire and spoke, his eyes still holding a hint of fervor. If that's really the case, then their strength will definitely increase rapidly after obtaining the Great Xia Empire's time-related treasures. Even if the Great Xia Empire possesses time-related treasures, we cannot possibly go all out to seize them now. After all, the laws of this universe are still binding on the remnant immortal level experts of our Heavenly God Academy, so their strength will naturally not be particularly formidable. At this moment, Tianjue seemed to see clearly the burning passion in Wu Ju's eyes, and then he shook his head and said, the laws governing this universe still constrain those who are truly at the great emperor level or above. Or perhaps the laws of this universe do not allow the appearance of remnant immortals or those stronger than remnant immortals. Therefore, their strength was naturally suppressed in a terrifying way. Of course, beings who attain immortality through worldly enlightenment will not be suppressed. They speculated that there might be a mortal immortal within the Great Xia Empire, and based on this, their Heavenly God Academy dared not attack the Great Xia Empire, unless it can be confirmed that the top expert in the Great Xia Empire is a remnant immortal. Chapter 7:27 The Gap Between Mortal Immortals and True Immortals, Longevity Substances. Therefore, even if they now know that there are things within the Great Xia Empire that can rapidly help these land-based or otherworldly beings within the Great Xia Empire grow, they cannot possibly attack the Great Xia Empire at this time. If the true powerhouse in the Great Xia Empire is a red dust immortal, then defeating this red dust immortal will not be as easy as imagined. After all, a powerhouse at the mortal immortal realm is far superior to a powerhouse at the true immortal realm. The experts in their Heavenly God Academy are all at the level of remnant immortal. Although a powerful being at the level of a remnant immortal carries the word immortal. However, there is still some distance from the level of true immortals. Of course, this is because this universe has great restrictions on powerhouses at the true immortal level. Therefore, even if a true immortal level expert appeared in this universe, the strength they displayed was not particularly powerful. They will at least be suppressed by one level. Take Kun Pengzi of the Great Xia Empire, for example. Although his strength is indeed very powerful. However, to unleash his true power, he would need to weaken himself by at least one minor realm. However, for Kun Pengzi, he himself is someone who can fight against opponents of higher levels. Therefore, even if his strength is reduced by a small realm, it is still no weaker than his current realm. However, this would be a significant disadvantage for others. Even so, a powerhouse at the level of a remnant immortal is still considered one of the most powerful beings in this universe. After all, even a crippled immortal still carries the word immortal in his name. Therefore, his strength naturally surpasses that of an emperor-level being. This is why the Heavenly God Academy is so powerful. Some of the top experts in those forbidden zones have also reached this level. Therefore, those at the level of a remnant immortal are the most powerful beings in this universe. More importantly, these powerful beings at the level of remnant immortals possessed some mysterious things about this universe. After all, although breaking through to the true immortal realm allows one to live for millions of years. However, since they have not yet broken through to the true immortal realm, they can live for millions or even tens of millions of years, which naturally means they have mastered the secrets of this world. For example, the Xianyuan family also possessed the secret of immortality. However, they do not possess many secrets to immortality. The difference between the true immortal realm and the mortal immortal realm lies in lifespan, because those at the red dust immortal realm can live for at least 5 million years. This clearly shows the difference between the true immortal realm and the mortal immortal realm. However, there is a significant difference in the methods for breaking through from the true immortal realm to the mortal immortal realm. The true immortal realm only requires the laws of this world to support their breakthrough. It can be said that reaching the true immortal realm only requires your talent and the support of the laws of this world. As long as your talent is absolutely unparalleled, and this universe can support you to break through to the realm of true immortal. In that case, you can break through to the true immortal realm. However, the immortal realm is not as easy to attain as the true immortal realm. It is extremely difficult to truly break through to the realm of the immortal of the mortal world. This is someone who has achieved immortality in the mortal world. Therefore, his breakthrough method was naturally very demanding. For example, the way that a powerful figure at the Great Emperor level breaks through is a realm created by a powerful figure simulating the way a powerful figure at the mortal immortal realm breaks through. Otherwise, the Great Emperor realm in the past wouldn't have had so many prefixes. Previously, the true immortal realm was equivalent to the Great Emperor realm. However, the gap between the Great Emperor realms is vast. Above the Great Emperor realm is the Heavenly Emperor realm. The Heavenly Emperor realm consists of the current First Emperor, Second Emperor, and Third Emperor, which respectively represent the first, second, and third levels of the Heavenly Emperor realm. However, the Heavenly Emperor realm was completely crossed out later on. That's why he became the first or second emperor. Moreover, each breakthrough in this realm elevates one's life once again. After all, the lifespan of an emperor-level being is not particularly long. If one cannot break through and elevate their lifespan, then even the lifespan of a heavenly emperor is extremely short. This is why some people can remain at the great emperor level for such a long time. To break through the realm of the mortal immortal, one must reach the level of a 9-life emperor. Once you reach this point, you can begin to experience the trials of the mortal world. Then, one still needs to overcome 9 tribulations to truly become a powerful being in the mortal realm. It should be noted that most powerful individuals don't even have time to undergo tribulation. After all, even if one reaches the level of 9-generation emperor, one can only live for 500,000 years. Of course, this is under normal circumstances. This wouldn't happen under other conditions. For example, if you lived in a world where longevity-enhancing substances were abundant, even a powerful being at the great emperor level could live for millions of years. For example, the legendary immortal realm. In a legendary immortal realm, a true immortal level powerhouse can live for at least tens of millions of years. Those who reach the level of true immortal or above can become the ruler of this universe and are immortal. They have very long lifespans. It could even be said that even if the world were destroyed, they might not necessarily perish. However, the realm of the mortal immortal is not something that can be achieved simply through talent. He also needs amazing perseverance. Otherwise, how could the powerful immortals at the Heavenly God Academy and those in these forbidden zones not choose to become mortal immortals? It's just that they don't have the ability to become immortals in the mortal world right now. More importantly, the remnants of immortals in the Heavenly God Academy or those forbidden zones all have ways to maintain their vitality. Therefore, at this point, they naturally wouldn't risk choosing to become immortals in the mortal world. After all, once they make a choice, they have no chance to back down. However, during their journey to immortality in a mortal world, they have a high chance of perishing. This is certainly not what they want to see. After all, which powerful individual who successfully broke through to the level of a remnant immortal didn't spend hundreds of thousands or even millions of years? To put it simply, they are afraid of dying. Therefore, I dare not choose this path. More importantly, they haven't seen anyone succeed on this path. This is also why the remnant immortals in the Heavenly God Academy and the Forbidden Zone dare not choose this path. Of course, there are people in the current Great Xia Empire who have taken this path. That is the Emperor. After all, the one summoned was originally a being at the level of a mortal immortal. Moreover, In his original universe, he had already followed this path and become a being of the immortal realm. If it weren't for meeting the protagonist of that era, then it's possible that the Emperor might actually go to the immortal realm. Then, with his perseverance and talent, he might actually break through to become a celestial king-level powerhouse in his universe. Unfortunately, he encountered the protagonist of that era and also the true Heavenly Emperor. Chapter 728, The Importance Attached by the Strongest in the Forbidden Zone and the Unfathomable Heavenly God Academy. Although the three geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy all had a restless look in their eyes. However, at this time they did not choose to have the remnant immortal-level experts from the Heavenly God Academy take action directly. More importantly, they were not qualified to have the top experts from the Heavenly God Academy take action. Therefore, all they can do now is watch the Great Xia Empire grow. Of course, the most important thing is that the path to immortality will begin 100 years from now. Therefore, the Heavenly God Academy would not choose to attack the Great Xia Empire at this time. After all, they had been waiting for millions of years for the path to immortality that was about to begin. So how could their Heavenly God Academy possibly choose to make a move at this moment? Of course, the immortal matter possessed by the Heavenly God Academy comes at a price. After all, the price of the immortal matter in the Forbidden Zone is that they have to harvest the lives of people in this universe every era. Only in this way can their lives be preserved. If these immortal substances in the Heavenly God Academy come without a price, how could the top experts in those Forbidden Zones let them go so easily? It can be said that the powerful figures in the Forbidden Zone are very clear about the price of these immortal substances in the Heavenly God Academy. That's why they didn't choose to attack the Heavenly God Academy. The simplest method for the powerful within the Forbidden Zone is to harvest life within this universe. Then they launched a dark upheaval, forcing them to use life forms from these universes to extend their own lifespans. It can be said that their method is the simplest and most straightforward. However, their methods are the most cruel to living beings outside the world. Just as the Heavenly God Academy withdrew its attention, the Supreme Being within the Forbidden Zone also awoke. After all, the great battle between Emperor-level powerhouses taking place in the sky naturally affected their slumber. More importantly, the power of the palm strike unleashed by the great accomplished holy body far exceeded that of an ordinary great emperor. Therefore, it was natural that the supreme beings in these forbidden zones were awakened. Many supreme beings stared in shock at the direction of the great accomplished holy body in the sky, because these supreme beings can sense just how powerful the aura emanating from the current ministers has reached. It should be noted that only a little over a decade had passed since the great accomplished holy body fought the supreme being in their forbidden zone. However, in just over a decade, the strength of the great accomplished sacred body has increased to this level. This moment left the supreme beings within the forbidden zone in disbelief. What exactly does the Great Xia Empire possess that allows these unorthodox Tao-attaining beings to advance so rapidly? If we obtain these secrets of the Great Xia Empire within the Forbidden Zone, could we then reach a very powerful level before even reaching the immortal path? At this moment, a supreme being from within the Forbidden Zone slowly peeked out and looked towards the direction of the Great Xia Empire, saying, after he finished speaking, you could see a burning glint in the eyes of this supreme being in the Forbidden Zone. Clearly, he could no longer contain himself and wanted to launch a final attack on the Great Xia Empire. We don't know what secrets the Great Xia Empire holds, but I do know that if we were to launch an attack on the Great Xia Empire now, we would be the most foolish people. Just as this supreme being finished speaking, the voice of another supreme being slowly rang out beside him. At the same time, this supreme being looked at the previous supreme being with a hint of disdain in his eyes, because he hadn't expected that the supreme being from just now would be so stupid. It should be noted that the aura emanating from the Great Xia Empire last time led the remnant immortals inside to speculate that it had reached the red dust immortal realm. How could such an existence be something that even the supreme beings within their forbidden zones could provoke? That's right. Although the Great Xia Empire may possess a time-related treasure, attacking it is not as simple as we imagine. After all, even the ancestor is silent, so how could we possibly attack the Great Xia Empire? Another supreme being glanced at the supreme being who had just spoken, and then leisurely looked towards the direction of the Great Xia Empire, and said, although he also wanted to obtain this treasure from the Great Xia Empire to enhance his own strength. However, he naturally has his own self-awareness. Although the supreme beings in these forbidden zones are all quite powerful now. However, their strength seemed somewhat weak in the face of the Great Xia Empire. After all, the Great Xia Empire has so many powerful figures. Moreover, judging from the disabled experts in their forbidden zone, the last top expert had already reached the red dust immortal realm. Even if they haven't reached the realm of the immortal of the mortal world, they're probably not far from that realm. Therefore, they naturally understood at this point that the Great Xia Empire was not to be trifled with. Alas, what a pity, such a wonderful treasure is not ours. The first Supreme Being to speak suddenly realized what the two Supreme Beings were saying, and then looked towards the direction of the Great Xia Empire with a hint of regret in his eyes. After he finished speaking, he fell silent. After all, it's impossible for them to obtain the treasures of the Great Xia Empire now. The other two Supreme Beings also fell silent after hearing his words. After all, if they could really obtain such a treasure, their strength would definitely increase to a terrifying level. Let's think about how to deal with the upcoming path to immortality first. After all, this path to immortality is influenced by the Great Xia Empire, and no one knows what role the Heavenly God Academy is playing in it. Just as these three Supreme Beings fell silent, an aged voice slowly drifted from afar. Then, an old man appeared before the three Supreme Beings. At the same time, the old man's gaze drifted leisurely towards the direction of the Heavenly God Academy. The path to immortality was opened once before. However, that journey to immortality did not lead them to the legendary immortal realm. More importantly, there were many plans related to the Heavenly God Academy behind that path to immortality. So don't be fooled by the fact that the powerful figures in the Forbidden Zone have time to cooperate with the Heavenly God Academy again. However, they guarded against the Heavenly God Academy even more fiercely than they guarded against thieves. Of course, even the Supreme Being within this Forbidden Zone was unaware of the Heavenly God Academy's ultimate plan. Even the remnant immortals within the Forbidden Zone were unaware of the Heavenly God Academy's plan. The three Supreme Beings also realized what the old man meant after hearing his words. Although they did not experience that path to immortality once before. However, they also suspected that the Heavenly God Academy was not as simple as they had imagined. If the Heavenly God Academy were truly that simple, then why would they possibly attack the Great Xia Empire? Chapter 729, An Era of Prodigies, the Tragedy of the Holy Land's Powerful Figures. Then, the Supreme Being in the Forbidden Area looked sullenly in the direction of the Heavenly God Academy. Of course, at this moment, it wasn't just the Supreme Beings within this Forbidden Zone who looked towards the Heavenly God Academy with a hint of doubt in their eyes. Even the Supreme Beings in other Forbidden Zones harbored the same doubts. Of course, none of the Supreme Beings in any of the Forbidden Zones had any intention of attacking the Great Xia Empire at this time. After all, they still have some self-awareness. Moreover, the path to immortality is about to begin. Therefore, they naturally cannot afford to waste their energy and time here. Once the path to immortality is opened, they may actually enter the legendary immortal realm. Therefore, they naturally don't need to plot against the Great Xia Empire's time-related treasures, unless the path to immortality is fake. In that case, they might also plot to acquire the Great Xia Empire's time-limited treasures. But they absolutely will not make a move now. While the Supreme Beings within the Forbidden Zone remained completely silent, Xian Yuan Wudao, the top emperor of the Xian Yuan family, slowly opened his eyes. As an emperor-level being, he naturally sensed the terrifying aura emanating from the great, accomplished holy body. So he looked in the direction of the great, accomplished holy body with a puzzled expression. I didn't expect that this Great Xia Empire's great completion holy body would grow so fast. At this rate of growth, it probably won't be long before he catches up with me. Then, Xian Yuan Wudao looked leisurely in the direction of the Great Xia Empire and said, his eyes filled with a sense of helplessness. However, one could sense that his aura was undergoing a tremendous change. Because of the last great battle, his cultivation level began to slowly loosen. It probably won't be long before he breaks through to the next level. Moreover, Xian Yuan Wudao is currently in a state of transformation. In other words, he may directly enter the next realm now. However, the transformation process may not be as simple as it seems, because it takes a certain amount of time for you to transform from one realm to another. What he lacks now is time. Of course, at this moment, it wasn't just Xian Yuan Wudao of the Xian Yuan family who was watching the sky above the sea. The top powers have also turned their attention to the skies above the sea area, especially those powerhouses who have already reached the quasi-emperor level. They stared at the sky above the sea with disbelief in their eyes. Among them is the Temple of War. Inside the Temple of the God of War, an elderly man dressed in a white robe stared at the sky above the sea with disbelief in his eyes. I never expected that there would be such a terrifying existence in the Great Xia Empire. Moreover, during the last great battle, this great accomplished holy body was not much different from me in strength. Now he has reached such a level that I cannot even muster the ability to resist. It seems that his strength has far exceeded that of an ordinary emperor. Then the old man in white slowly spoke. From the words of this white-robed old man, we can learn that his realm is at the same level as that of the former great accomplishment Saint Body. In other words, this white-robed old man's realm belongs to an alternative path to enlightenment. This shows that the Temple of War is not as simple as one might imagine. However, the old man in white soon sighed again. Then he slowly and completely suppressed the aura that was about to erupt from his body. Then it was as if his presence had never been there. Meanwhile, the top experts from the other holy lands also turned their gazes in this direction. At the same time, their eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. They never expected that the strength of the great accomplishment holy body would increase so terrifyingly. Moreover, the eldest prince and princess of the Great Xia Empire were traveling with so many emperor-level figures. It should be noted that 3 beings at the emperor level were displayed this time. The appearance of 3 powerful figures at the great emperor level means that the great emperor's succession will likely fall to the Great Xia Empire this time. Thinking of this, they could only sigh silently. At the same time, I feel sorrow for the prodigies of this era. After all, it's not as easy for the prodigies of this era to grow up. These 3 top geniuses of the Great Xia Empire alone were enough to leave them helpless. After all, the strength of this eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire has reached such a terrifying level. The princess of the Great Xia Empire is no less powerful than the young supreme being of the Great Xia Empire. This shows that the Great Xia Empire has at least 3 young supreme beings. In that case, this generation's prodigy will have to face 3 supreme-level young beings. Moreover, this era also has the fiery young Marshal Xin Yuanpa, the 4 prodigies of the demonic sect and their demonic offspring, as well as several members of the War God Palace, and of course, several members of the Heavenly God Academy. Therefore, it is extremely difficult for these ordinary geniuses from holy lands to face off against these top geniuses who have become emperor-level powerhouses. It could even be said that they are facing a hellish level of difficulty right now. They were more desperate than the prodigies of other eras. While these quasi-emperor-level powerhouses were still marveling at this point, Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong returned to Chu Wuxuang's side once again in the sky above the sea. The 2 of them completely concealed their aura. Lu Bu, with a simple and honest expression, cupped his hands in a gesture of respect to Chu Wuxuang. It was as if the fierce look he had just displayed was not something he had actually done. Zhao Zilong stood before Chu Wuxuang as if he were a true warrior. At the same time, his gaze swept over the Heavenly God Academy without the slightest ripple. The quasi-emperor at the peak of the Heavenly God Academy took several steps back after feeling Zhao Zilong's gaze. However, he breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that Zhao Zilong did not make a move. After all, this person could even kill the avatar of a great emperor-level expert, so how could a mere quasi-emperor like himself possibly withstand Zhao Zilong's attack? Junior Xin Yuanpa pays respects to General Beima and General Mozhen. At this moment, the young Marshal Xin Yuanpa of the Fiery Blaze hurriedly stepped forward, cupped his hands to Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu, and spoke with a respectful expression. At the same time, you can see a hint of admiration in his eyes. If he were to name his true idol, it would undoubtedly be Chu Fan, the contemporary human emperor of the Great Xia Empire. However, if we're talking about the kind of person he truly wants to be, then it's naturally the top generals of the Great Xia Empire, such as the White Horse General and the Demon God General. After all, the White Horse General of the Great Xia Empire was a man who roamed the world with only a spear. He was known as Zhao Zilong, the White Horse Silver Spear. Lu Bu, the Demon God General of the Great Xia Empire, roamed the world alone with his halberd, and his whole being seemed like a demon god descended to earth, hence the title Demon God General. As for the other generals, they were also very famous. However, because Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu were the first to follow Chu Fan, their reputations naturally surpassed those of the other generals. Chapter 730 The Envy of All the Prodigies, Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu's Little Fanboy. After hearing what Xin Yuanpa said, Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu leisurely looked at him. Then, the 2 of them nodded at Xin Yuanpa at the same time. However, the 2 of them are currently ignoring Xin Yuanpa completely. After all, in their eyes, Xin Yuanpa was just a junior, so he was naturally not worth their attention. More importantly, Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu were already protecting Chu Wuxuang and the other person. Therefore, their attention is mostly focused on distant places nowadays. Naturally, they wouldn't notice the junior in front of them. Although Xin Yuanpa was somewhat disappointed upon seeing this scene, he knew that he was not worthy of the attention of these 2 top experts from the Great Xia Empire. Then he slowly turned his gaze to Chu Wuxuang. After all, this was a prince of the Great Xia Empire, and the strength Chu Wuxuang had just displayed had shocked him greatly. Although at first he thought that the most powerful person in the Great Xia Empire was that young supreme Chu Chun. This is indeed true, because the strength of this young supreme being in the Great Xia Empire is truly terrifying. Even Xinyuan Po was repeatedly defeated by Chu Chun, the young supreme being of the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, he naturally understood just how powerful Chu Chun was. Just as Xinyuan Po was still sizing up Chu Wushuang, the geniuses present were also looking at Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu with shock in their eyes, because they had just discovered that Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu had killed a powerful figure at the level of an emperor. Of course, these prodigies did not know that Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu had only killed the clone of that emperor-level expert. They thought that Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu had killed the emperor-level expert from the Heavenly God Academy. Therefore, when they look at Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong now, their eyes are filled with admiration. After all, they hadn't expected that the two generals of the Great Xia Empire would defeat a powerful expert at the level of an emperor from the Heavenly God Academy so easily. More importantly, they also completely killed this powerful emperor-level expert from the Heavenly God Academy, something they never expected. These prodigies looked at Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu with a hint of shock in their eyes. I never imagined that the two generals of the Great Xia Empire would be so powerful. I had only heard that they were at the quasi-emperor level before. Why are they now at the great emperor level? At this moment, one of the prodigies looked in the direction of Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu with a hint of curiosity in his eyes and said, "You can see that in his eyes, besides a hint of curiosity, there is more confusion and bewilderment." Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu were both very famous throughout the Great Xia Empire. After all, one was the legendary White Horse General, and the other was the legendary God and Demon General. Therefore, their names are naturally very well known. However, while their voices were loud, everyone also knew that both of them were at the quasi-emperor level. However, the strength that the two of them had just displayed had already reached the great emperor realm, which was what made the prodigy feel incredible. Although we don't know why Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong have reached the level of great emperor, the strength of this God Demon General and White Horse General has far exceeded our imagination. They truly deserve to be my idols. The Great Xia Empire has more than just these two powerful figures. In addition to General Bai Ma and General Shen Ma, there was another top expert who directly interrupted the support of that top expert from the Heavenly God Academy. This, now that you mention it, I just remembered. I didn't expect that His Highness and Princess of the Great Xia Empire would bring three powerful figures at the level of great emperors or above this time. It seems that we will not be able to obtain this so-called great emperor's inheritance this time. Whether or not we can obtain the emperor's inheritance is not up to us. And how could His Highness and Princess of the Great Xia Empire possibly be interested in such a trivial emperor-level inheritance? Yes, perhaps the inheritance of an emperor is an extraordinary opportunity for us, but for the princes and princesses of the Great Xia Empire, it is something they can easily obtain. At this moment, the other prodigies present also began to discuss among themselves, while their eyes were filled with curiosity as they looked in the direction of Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu. They naturally knew about Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu. After all, these two were the legendary White Horse General and the God Demon General. More importantly, Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu were their idols. It can be said that many talented individuals regard the two as their idols. Therefore, they naturally knew about the legends of Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu, and there were many versions of the White Horse General and the God Demon General. At the same time, many prodigies were shocked to see the princes and princesses of the Great Xia Empire emerge, accompanied by three powerful figures at the level of emperors. You should know that these geniuses were still shocked by the inheritance of the great emperor-level powerhouse. But the prince and princess of the Great Xia Empire came out with a great emperor-level powerhouse. And there's more than one. This instantly made them envious of Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran of the Great Xia Empire. However, no matter how much they envy Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran, there's nothing they can do about it now. After all, I was born here. They cannot change their origins. Therefore, all the current prodigies are hoping that the two top prodigies of the Great Xia Empire will not covet this imperial inheritance. In this way, they might still have a chance to obtain the emperor's inheritance. Otherwise, it would truly be irrelevant to them. Upon realizing this, all the geniuses present turned their gazes toward Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran. At the same time, there was a hint of anticipation in his eyes. Of course, at this time, they not only expected Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran to look down on this emperor's inheritance, but also that the three geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy would not look down on this inheritance. Otherwise, obtaining this inheritance would not be as simple as they imagined, since three of the geniuses in the Heavenly God Academy have reached the Great Saint level this time. It should be noted that the most outstanding among the geniuses present were at the Saint King level. Compared to these geniuses who had truly reached the Great Saint level, they could only be considered ordinary geniuses. Meanwhile, the three top geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy ignored these so-called geniuses. They were still thinking about how to deal with the three geniuses of the Great Xia Empire once they entered the secret realm. Of course, the most important thing is to deal with the eldest prince and princess of the Great Xia Empire. After all, the talents of the eldest prince and princess of the Great Xia Empire far exceeded their expectations. Chapter 731 The Great Emperor's Secret Realm emerges, and the prodigies enter the Great Emperor's secret realm. Under the expectant gaze of everyone, a giant sea column also appeared on the sea surface. Then, the surrounding seawater seemed to surge upwards into the sky, as if it were being poured back into the ocean. After these seawaters appeared in the sky, suddenly, a gate made of seawater appeared in the sky. A terrifying aura emanated from the gate. From this terrifying aura, one can tell that the owner of this aura has at least reached the Great Emperor realm. At this moment, Chu Wuxuang and the others also saw the gate in the sky, and Chu Wuxuang's eyes instantly turned golden. Then, the golden light in his eyes seemed to pierce through time and space, looking directly at the gate made of seawater behind him. Chu Wuxuang's golden eyes were formed from the condensed fortune of the Great Xia Empire, which is why he can now see places that ordinary people cannot. In Chu Wuxuang's eyes, he could also see that above the gate made of seawater, a terrifying golden light emanated. Although these terrifying golden rays could not compare to the golden aura of fortune above the Great Xia Empire, this golden aura was not particularly weak either. This also confirmed Chu Wuxuang's initial guess. The Great Emperor in this Great Emperor's secret realm is not as simple as imagined. Perhaps when the Great Emperor who inherited the Great Emperor's legacy in this Great Emperor's secret realm was alive, he was at least more powerful than the top Great Emperor, Xianyuan Wudao. With a look of curiosity in his eyes, Chu Wuxuang headed straight for the entrance to the Great Emperor's secret realm in the sky. At this moment, he naturally did not notice the killing intent in the eyes of the three top geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy. Of course, one could argue that even if Chu Wuxuang noticed the killing intent in their eyes, he wouldn't pay them any attention. After all, for Chu Wuxuang, three great saint-level geniuses could be killed with ease. Even without mobilizing the Great Xia Empire's fortune, he was already among the top beings in the Great Sage realm. If he were to mobilize the Great Xia Empire's fortune, his strength would be even more terrifying. Even ordinary quasi-emperors would be considered weaker in his presence. This is also Chu Wuxuang's trump card and his source of confidence. As Chu Wuxuang slowly approached the entrance to the Great Emperor's secret realm, all the geniuses present stared at the entrance with extremely tense eyes. After all, they must enter this place if they want to obtain the Emperor's inheritance this time. Therefore, their eyes naturally held a hint of excitement. As Chu Wuxuang slowly arrived at the entrance of the Great Emperor's secret realm, Chu Yanran and Xin Yuanpa and the others also slowly approached the Great Emperor's secret realm. After all, they came specifically for this Great Emperor's secret realm, so they naturally wouldn't let this opportunity slip by. Then, top geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy or other forces slowly approached this place. After Chu Wuxuang and the others arrived at the entrance of the Great Emperor's secret realm, they felt a terrifying suction force drawing them in from within. If a genius at the True King realm were here, they would probably be directly pulled into the secret realm by this terrifying power. However, Chu Wuxuang and the others have already reached the Great Sage realm, so as long as they don't actively go inside, they won't be directly sucked into this power. Then Chu Wuxuang nodded to Chu Yanran and the others in front of him. Without hesitation, he took a step forward. As soon as he took a step forward, his entire figure vanished instantly. After Chu Wuxuang disappeared, the Qilin in the sky roared angrily, but the Qilin chariot in the sky slowly came to a stop. Clearly, the Qilin chariot was waiting for its young master to return. Upon seeing this scene, Chu Yanran and Xin Yuanpa and the others entered without hesitation. Subsequently, the members of the Xianyuan family and the members of the Heavenly God Academy disappeared from everyone's sight without the slightest hesitation. Although the strength of these prodigies from the Xianyuan family was not as great as that of Xianyuanpa, they had all reached the Saint King realm. Among the geniuses present, their strength was considered quite good. After the prodigies from several top forces entered the Great Emperor's secret realm, the other prodigies present could no longer hold back and quickly headed towards the entrance of the secret realm. Soon, these prodigies entered the Great Emperor's secret realm directly through the outer entrance. The Emperor's secret realm is a sea area. It wasn't much different from the ocean outside. Upon entering the Great Emperor's secret realm, Chu Wuxuang arrived directly at an island. It can be said that this Emperor's secret realm is like a small world. Looking at the island in front of him, Chu Wuxuang's eyes also held a hint of curiosity. He then stopped flying and slowly approached the island. As soon as he arrived on the island, he felt a terrifying force approaching him. The next second, a strange creature dressed in a silver-white robe appeared in front of Chu Wuxuang. This strange creature, dressed in a long silver-white robe, also had a pair of dragon horns on its head. The aura emanating from him had reached the Saint King realm. Without hesitation, the creature with dragon horns launched an attack on Chu Wuxuang. The trident in his hand emanated a terrifying power of seawater. It was as if it were a sea god in this sea area. At the same time, a colossal wave appeared behind him instantly. The terrifying waves crashed directly towards Chu Wuxuang. Sensing this scene, Chu Wuxuang clapped her hands lightly. Then he felt as if the entire space-time was frozen in place by his terrifying power. Even the waves in the sky were frozen in place. The strange creature with dragon horns looked at Chu Wuxuang with disbelief. He hadn't expected Chu Wuxuang's strength to be so terrifying. Chu Wuxuang, with a smile on her face, slowly walked towards the dragon-shaped creature. When they arrived in front of the dragon-shaped creature, Chu Wuxuang gently pointed a finger at it. The next second, a terrifying force completely annihilated the dragon-like creature. The seawater in the sky also instantly lost control. Then, without any surprise, it fell directly from the sky. Chu Wuxuang slowly passed through this section of seawater. It was as if an invisible barrier was blocking the seawater in the sky from his surroundings. Chapter 732, The Law of Water, the Treasure Heart of the Ocean, and the Ancient Beast Tingsha. In the blink of an eye, Chu Wuxuang arrived on another island. Upon arriving on the island, Chu Wuxuang immediately sensed a powerful and attractive aura emanating from it. He then immediately turned his gaze to the very center of the island. At this moment, a blue gemstone stands in the very center of the island. Perhaps it could be said that the power emanating from this blue gemstone is attracting Chu Wuxuang. Without hesitation, Chu Wuxuang headed straight for the blue gem and appeared in front of it in just a moment. It turns out to be the heart of the ocean. This thing can greatly enhance the abilities of those who cultivate the laws of water, but doesn't seem to have much effect on me. Upon seeing the blue gem, Chu Wuxuang instantly understood its purpose, and he sighed helplessly. Chu Wuxuang originally cultivated the law of power, so he didn't have much interest in the law of water. Of course, even so, the heart of the ocean was still quite tempting to him. After all, it is a treasure for cultivation. Even if he can't use it, he can still take it back. Moreover, as the elder brother, he also wanted to bring a gift for his younger brother, even though the laws he cultivated in the heart of the ocean were very different from those of his younger brother. However, it is still a nice decorative item. Of course, if other geniuses knew what Chu Wuxuang was thinking, they would be extremely surprised. After all, even in the outside world, the heart of the ocean is something that even quasi-emperors would find impossible to obtain, but to Chu Wuxuang, it was merely a fine decorative item. As Chu Wuxuang slowly approached the heart of the ocean, a faint smile began to appear at the corners of his mouth. Just as he was about to reach the heart of the ocean, a terrifying black shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. Then a terrifying force struck him directly. Chu Wuxuang seemed to have anticipated this scene, and a golden spear instantly appeared in his hand. Then, gently, he hurled the golden spear towards the direction of that terrifying force. The terrifying power instantly collided with the dark figure. The next second, Chu Wuxuang stood still. He looked at the scene in front of him with a calm expression. But what appeared before him was a colossal creature. The head alone was as big as an island. And above this enormous head is the heart of the ocean. The tongue snake, I never expected to see the legendary tongue snake here. Just a moment after glancing at the enormous black shadow in front of him, Chu Wuxuang instantly recognized it. Then, his eyes showed a hint of curiosity as he examined the dark figure in front of him. Because the tongue snake is a legendary ancient creature, even Chu Wuxuang, the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire, had never seen it. However, as the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire, he had naturally seen what Tingsha looked like, though these were all things his teachers had told him. Therefore, he discovered Tingsha's identity with just one glance. Human, if you leave now, I will forgive and forget your past transgressions. The tongue snake in front of him seemed to have noticed Chu Wuxuang's difference as well. So, it flicked its huge tongue and spoke to Chu Wuxuang with a hint of fear in its eyes. Clearly, this tongue snake also had no intention of fighting Chu Wuxuang at this moment. Upon hearing Tingsha's voice, Chu Wuxuang slowly planted the golden spear in his hand into the ground. Then he slowly raised his head and looked in the direction of Tingsha. Then, a golden light instantly emanated from his body. A terrifying power emanated directly from his body and then pierced through the entire sky. This prince does not like to talk to others with his head held high, especially animals. After he finished speaking, a huge golden palm fell directly from the sky. The terrifying power struck the tongue snake directly in front of them. Then, in an instant, it pressed the entire body of the tongue snake to the ground. Upon sensing the terrifying pressure emanating from him, Tingsha's eyes instantly flashed with fear. However, at this point, his entire enormous head had been pressed to the ground. There was a hint of disbelief in those eyes, which were as blue as the sea. Meanwhile, Chu Wuxuang, having completed all of this, slowly flew into the sky, looking down at the tongue snake crawling on the ground in front of him. Isn't it fine now? How dare that little Tung-sha not cooperate with your highness? Looking at the tongue snake lying prostrate on the ground in front of him, Chu Wuxuang spoke leisurely, and at the same time, a hint of satisfaction could be seen in his eyes. Tung-sha was filled with rage after hearing Chu Wuxuang's words, but no matter how angry he was, he couldn't hurt Chu Wuxuang. After all, Tung-sha's true strength was only at the peak of the Saint King realm, while Chu Wuxuang in front of him had already reached the late stage of the Great Saint realm. Therefore, it was naturally very easy for Chu Wuxuang to defeat the guy in front of him. Human, I can give you the heart of the ocean, but please spare me. After learning of Chu Wuxuang's prowess, Tung-sha spoke with a hint of helplessness, his eyes filled with a sense of despair as he looked at the heart of the ocean. After all, the heart of the ocean can enhance his strength. However, if he didn't hand over the heart of the ocean, his life might be lost here. Thinking of this, the helplessness in his eyes turned into calm. He still felt a pang of regret regarding the heart of the ocean. Do I need you to give up what I want? However, your physical body is not bad. Why don't you follow me? Chu Wuxuang scoffed after hearing Tung-sha's words, since obtaining the heart of the ocean would be very easy for him now. However, when he looked at the tongue snake in front of him, there was still a hint of curiosity in his eyes. After all, the Tung-sha is an ancient mythical beast. Although it cannot compare to the four divine beasts, Tung-sha is still an ancient mythical beast, and it is the top mythical beast besides the four divine beasts. That's why Chu Wuxuang is now thinking of subduing Tung-sha, so that he will have someone under his command. Upon hearing Chu Wuxuang's words, Tung-sha's eyes instantly flashed with anger. He never expected that the human in front of him would want to subdue him. You should know that all the demons and beasts within a radius of tens of thousands of miles would kneel before him. But now a mere human dared to try to subdue him, which instantly enraged him. Then, a terrifying aura instantly emanated from Tung-sha's body. The oppressive aura emanating from him also began to gradually weaken under this terrifying presence. Chapter 733, Chu Wuxuang violently attacks Tung-sha, forcing Tung-sha to submit. At the same time, one can see that many turbulent sea waters have appeared around Tung-sha. The surging sea water seemed to have fallen from the heavens, and the terrifying sea water enveloped Tung-sha completely. Then his body began to slowly grow larger. Of course, Chu Wuxuang, who was standing to the side, did not choose to stop the tongue snake, which was growing larger and larger. Instead, he looked at the tongue snake, which was growing larger and larger in front of him, with great interest. The Tung-sha's body appeared directly in the entire sky. His eyes were like a pair of bright moons in the sky, and then he opened his blood-red maw. Then he roared angrily in Chu Wuxuang's direction. A pillar carrying terrifying pressure was spat out directly from Tung-sha's mouth, and this terrifying attack was accompanied by a surging sea. Even a powerful expert at the early stage of the Great Sage realm would have to take this situation seriously. Of course, the one facing the attack from Tung-sha now is Chu Wuxuang, a top genius who has reached the late stage of the Great Sage realm. Therefore, he simply points a finger forward lightly. Then the entire space seemed to freeze. The next second, a golden light emanated directly from Chu Wuxuang's body. Then, the golden light transformed into terrifying auras, freezing the seawater falling towards it from the sky. The terrifying golden light froze the seawater directly into the sky. This caused a golden iceberg to appear in the sky instantly. Moreover, under Tung-sha's incredulous gaze, this golden iceberg transformed into streaks of pale golden light and vanished into the world. Therefore, Chu Wuxuang easily deflected the attack from the tongue snake in front of him. Then, with a teasing look, Chu Wuxuang continued to gaze at the tongue snake in front of him, wanting to see just what abilities the tongue snake possessed. At the same time, they also wanted to see if they, or rather the tongue snake in front of them, were qualified to be their pets. At this moment, Tung-sha seemed to sense that he was being looked down upon by Chu Wuxuang in front of him, so he roared again. Its enormous tail lashed out directly at Chu Wuxuang. The terrifying force caused the surrounding seawater to continuously overflow. Even the vast sea began to show huge, surging waves. The waves followed the tail of the tongue snake towards Chu Wuxuang. Chu Wuxuang shook her head leisurely upon seeing this scene. He hadn't expected this guy to choose brute force to fight him, and we saw him clench his right fist tightly. The next second, he threw a powerful punch at the tail of the tongue snake. A terrifying golden fist instantly filled the entire sky. Then the golden fist landed directly on the serpent's tail. The terrifying force caused the tongue snake's tail to be struck with tremendous force. Then a terrifying pain traveled from the tail into the body of the tongue snake. He then looked at Chu Wuxuang opposite him with a look of horror. At the same time, his body was also directly blasted away by this terrifying force. Then it crashed hard onto the sea. In an instant, his massive body was completely submerged by the surging waves of the sea. Chu Wuxuang shook her head helplessly upon seeing this scene. He had thought the legendary ancient beasts were incredibly powerful, but he never imagined they would be so weak. It should be noted that Chu Wuxuang's current level of power is only at the peak of the Saint King realm, which means that his current strength is at the same level as Tingsha. Even so, Tingsha could not withstand his attack. This shows just how powerful Chu Wuxuang really is. Of course, this doesn't mean that Tingsha is weak. Rather, Chu Wuxuang is already invincible among those of the same realm. That's why the Tingsha was so easily knocked away. The tongue snake, having fallen into the sea, naturally understood just how powerful the creature before it truly was. So at this moment, he glanced at Chu Wuxuang with a hint of anger in his eyes. He then swam directly into the depths of the sea. Chu Wuxuang, who was waiting for Tingsha to come up, naturally saw this scene as well. Then, a smile instantly appeared on his lips. Then, with a wave of his left hand, the heart of the ocean instantly appeared in his left hand. Chu Wuxuang then instantly stored the heart of the ocean in his storage ring. After doing all this, he transformed into a golden ray of light and headed towards the depths of the sea. At the same time, the golden spear planted on the island instantly transformed into a golden ray of light and followed Chu Wuxuang. Chu Wuxuang quickly intercepted Tingsha deep in the sea. Tingsha, who was frantically fleeing, did not expect that Chu Wuxuang would catch up with him so quickly. Then he unleashed another terrifying attack in Chu Wuxuang's direction. At the same time, the surrounding seawater transformed into terrifying water laws to trap Chu Wuxuang. Extinction. Upon seeing this scene, Chu Wuxuang simply uttered the word annihilate, and a terrifying power of law instantly locked down the surrounding space. Then it completely dissipated this terrifying attack. After doing all this, he appeared directly next to Tingsha. Then he punched Tingsha in the body. The terrifying force sent Tingsha's body flying into the sky. Although Tingsha still wanted to use the power of the seawater to stabilize his body. But how could he possibly withstand such a terrifying power? His body instantly appeared in the sky. The snake, or rather the snake itself, stared at Chu Wuxuang with a venomous look in its eyes. I wonder if you're willing to follow me now. If you continue not to follow me, then I will send you to the Western Paradise right now. Chu Wuxuang rubbed his hands together, looking at Tingsha with anticipation, and then spoke to Tingsha with a threatening expression. After hearing Chu Wuxuang's words, Tingsha flicked its tongue, and then its entire body, or rather the snake itself, began to slump. Then its massive body slowly began to shrink. Finally, it transformed into a small snake, only a few inches in size, and appeared in front of Chu Wuxuang. On the forehead of this small snake are two horns that look like dragon horns, but these are not the dragon horns of legend. Instead, it was a different horn that grew from the tongue snake, and it did not belong to the dragon. Now you're finally obedient, aren't you? You only listen when I personally beat you. But if you disobey again, I'll drag you out and beat you again. Looking at the little snake in front of him, Chu Wuxuang gently reached out a finger to touch its forehead, and then looked at the little snake with a strong sense of threat and said, Chapter 734, Unknown Flaming Mountain. Chu Yanran encounters a veteran expert from the Heavenly God Academy. At this moment, Tingsha looked at Chu Wuxuang with a pitiful expression in his eyes. If he had known that Chu Wuxuang was so violent, he would never have resisted in the first place. Then, the tongue snake transformed into a beam of light and disappeared from Chu Wuxuang's arm. Then all that could be seen was a picture of a serpent on Chu Wuxuang's arm. This is the true method by which Tingsha submits to others. After subduing the Tingsha, Chu Wuxuang continued forward, as he wanted to see the true opportunities within this great emperor's secret realm. He naturally looked down on the heart of the ocean. Or perhaps the ocean heart he just encountered was merely an ornament, not a true opportunity for him. While Chu Wuxuang obtained the heart of the ocean, Chu Yanran, after entering the great emperor's secret realm, did not appear in the sky above the sea area within the great emperor's secret realm. Instead, she found herself atop a raging inferno, with lava erupting in terrifying flames. Even a genius at the king level would likely be completely burned away by this terrifying burning sensation if they appeared here. Therefore, Chu Yanran is alone with no one else and is heading straight up the flaming mountain. At the very top of this so-called flaming mountain is a huge magma vent from which enormous temperatures are constantly being emitted. Lava flows, carrying terrifying flames and immense power, were continuously burning the surrounding sky. This caused the temperature of the surrounding sky to become extremely high. Moreover, the sky was dyed a fiery red. This is the true feeling of burning flames. However, Chu Yanran seemed completely oblivious to all of this, since she possessed the Phoenix Sacred Body, which naturally granted her complete immunity to these terrifying temperatures. More importantly, Chu Yanran's Phoenix Sacred Body comes with a terrifying Phoenix Sacred Flame. This kind of flame is among the top 3 of all flames. So she is now moving very easily towards the lava. Although she walked very lightly, it was clear that Chu Yanran's speed had far surpassed that of ordinary prodigies. In less than a moment, she appeared directly above the flaming mountain. At this moment, the magma seemed about to erupt. Terrifying flames were continuously burning the air around Chu Yanran. At the same time, it made the space around Chu Yanran extremely hot. Chu Yanran, who witnessed this scene, calmly gazed at the raging flames below. Without the slightest hesitation, she leaped into the air. If others saw this scene, they would be absolutely astonished. They never expected that someone would choose to ignore the temperature of the magma and jump directly into the volcano. Chu Yanran did it, and she wasn't even on guard. However, this so-called magma couldn't harm her in the slightest at this moment, because the Phoenix Sacred Flame around Chu Yanran was constantly enveloping her body. More importantly, the Phoenix Sacred Flame was constantly absorbing the surrounding flames to enhance its power. Therefore, this lava was not a bad thing for Chu Yanran. As Chu Yanran arrived directly in the center of the blazing lava, at this moment, she discovered that right in the center of the volcano was a terrifyingly huge platform. In front of her stood a huge cave. Inside the cave, one could still feel terrifying flames burning. Even Chu Yanran, who possessed the Phoenix Sacred Flame, could sense that the aura of the flame inside the cave was not weak. Then, a smile appeared on Chu Yanran's face, which had been expressionless before. She could naturally feel the terrifying burning flames emanating from inside the cave, and a smile instantly appeared on Chu Yanran's face. At the same time, she walked directly towards the cave without the slightest hesitation. However, just as Chu Yanran was about to reach the front of the cave, she stopped abruptly in her tracks. Then, with a cold look in his eyes, he gazed at the sky. As Chu Yanran's gaze turned toward the sky, several figures could be seen slowly descending from the lava in the sky. Of course, most importantly, these figures were all wearing long robes from the Heavenly God Academy. This shows that they're all disciples of the Heavenly God Academy. Of course, the most important thing is that they're all obviously not very young. At the same time, it can be sensed that they are not the pride of this era. More importantly, one of them had reached the late stage of the Great Sage Realm. These figures naturally noticed Chu Yanran at this moment. Then, an expression of excitement instantly appeared in their eyes. Then, these figures landed directly in front of Chu Yanran. I didn't expect to have such an unexpected gain here today. Being able to kill the Princess of Great Xia here will probably get even more rewards when we return to the Heavenly God Academy. One of the prodigies from the previous era of the Heavenly God Academy, who was at the mid-stage of the Great Sage Realm, spoke with a hint of excitement in his eyes. After he finished speaking, his gaze also turned to the great sages of the Heavenly God Academy beside him. Meanwhile, the prodigy from the previous era at the late Great Sage stage of the Heavenly God Academy frowned, because he didn't see any worry on Chu Yanran's face. Therefore, the eyes of this late-stage Great Sage prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy also carried a hint of solemnity. He didn't believe that the princess of the Great Xia Empire was a fool. This means that the princess of the Great Xia Empire is absolutely certain that she can escape from their clutches. How dare you disturb this princess? Are you courting death? At this moment, Chu Yanran leisurely turned her gaze to the veteran geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy in front of her, and her icy voice reached their ears. Upon hearing Chu Yanran's words, several of the top students from the Heavenly God Academy instantly displayed a strange expression on their faces. They didn't expect Chu Yanran to still dare to speak to them like that. However, what they didn't know was that Chu Yanran not only dared to speak to them like that, but also directly attacked these geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy. Chu Yanran threw a punch straight forward. The next second, a fiery red dragon appeared behind her. The fiery red dragon was stirring up the surrounding lava, causing it to vibrate continuously. Chapter 735, Chu Yanran's terrifying combat power, the volcanic eruption caused by the Great Battle. This terrifying fire dragon, carrying immense power, charged directly towards the several prodigies from the Heavenly God Academy ahead. The 3 veteran experts from the Heavenly God Academy were also quite surprised after feeling Chu Yanran's attack. They hadn't expected that Chu Yanran would attack them first, so they all looked at Chu Yanran with a hint of surprise in their eyes. However, The late-stage Great Sage from the Heavenly God Academy did not choose to linger. Instantly, a strong aura of flames emanated from his body. At the same time, he threw a punch straight forward. The next second, a Taotai suddenly appeared behind him. Moreover, this Taotai was also emitting intense purple flames. The terrifying power instantly collided with the fire dragon in the sky. The next second, these two terrifying forces collided instantly. The surrounding magma erupted instantly upon impact. One terrifying stream after another of lava fell directly from the sky. The other two veteran experts from the Heavenly God Academy, both at the mid-stage of the Great Sage realm, retreated upon seeing this scene, since the lava in the sky could not harm them. But they also didn't want the lava from the sky to fall on them. At this moment, Chu Yanran stood proudly in front of everyone. As the lava from the sky was about to fall on her, a phoenix could be seen above her head, continuously devouring the lava. This allowed Chu Yanran to stand unharmed in place. At the same time, Chu Yanran also had a fiery red immortal sword in her hand. This fiery red longsword is named Yanran, after Chu Yanran. Moreover, it took Tianjizi and Zhuge Liang several years to create it. It can be said that Chu Yanran's Yanran weapon, under the Supreme Emperor weapon category, far surpasses other weapons. Of course, the most important thing is that Chu Yanran cannot use the Supreme Emperor weapon, otherwise the Great Xia Empire would have forged a Supreme Emperor weapon for her. This is how the Great Xia Empire doted on Chu Yanran. Moreover, not only the Yanran in her hand, but also the fiery red robe she wore was considered the strongest among those below the Supreme Emperor weapon. As Chu Yanran took out the Yanran sword from her hand, a terrifying sword aura instantly emanated from her body. At the same time, a fiery red sword light fell directly from the sky. The next second, the fiery red sword light shot directly toward the three veteran experts from the Heavenly God Academy. Upon seeing this, the three students from the Heavenly God Academy all drew their weapons. The two veteran experts from the Heavenly God Academy, both at the mid-stage of the Great Sage realm, were holding long spears. The powerful expert from the Heavenly God Academy, who was at the late stage of the Great Sage realm, was holding a long sword. The long sword was also emanating a terrifying purple aura. Then, the three of them attacked Chu Yanran's direction as well. Chu Yanran then engaged in a fierce battle with the three top experts from the Heavenly God Academy. Although Chu Yanran's cultivation level was only at the mid-stage of the Great Sage realm, she did not fall behind in the slightest after fighting against the three from the Heavenly God Academy. On the contrary, she was constantly battling the three members of the Heavenly God Academy with the terrifying power within her. Their great battle also affected the entire volcano. Even the flames and lava in the center of the volcano were constantly raging. It was as if these flames and lava were about to erupt completely at any moment. However, the battle between Chu Yanran and her three companions did not stop at all. Instead, as the battle intensified, their fighting escalated from the underground magma to the sky. A terrifying aura instantly swept across the entire volcano. Chu Yanran, meanwhile, was holding a sword in both hands. She quickly slashed forward with a long sword in her hand. As soon as she unleashed that sword strike, a terrifying phoenix instantly appeared behind him. A phoenix carrying burning flames is constantly soaring across the sky. Then he charged headlong into the three people from the Heavenly God Academy ahead. The terrifying power instantly brought a look of horror to the eyes of the three students from the Heavenly God Academy. Meanwhile, the veteran expert from the Heavenly God Academy, who was in the late stage of the Great Sage realm, rapidly wielded the long sword in his hand. At the same time, a huge and ugly-looking creature suddenly appeared behind him. The terrifying creature instantly rushed towards the phoenix in front of it. Meanwhile, the other two veteran experts from the Heavenly God Academy also launched their attacks. Suddenly, a ferocious-looking sky-devouring wolf and a golden crow engulfed in flames appeared before them. Three terrifying attacks came directly towards the phoenix that Chu Yanran had unleashed. Then, the terrifying attacks collided instantly in the sky. The shockwaves generated by the collision caused even the laws of the sky to tremble. Meanwhile, the volcano below was also completely damaged by this terrifying collision. The next second, the volcano below began to erupt with a large amount of flames. One after another, enormous flames shot directly toward the group in the sky. Upon witnessing this scene, the students from the Heavenly God Academy immediately chose to hide, because the flames are now far beyond the lava below. Therefore, the students from the Heavenly God Academy naturally chose to hide. As for Chu Yanran, she directly used her phoenix sacred flame to envelop herself, and then threw the long sword in her hand downwards. The terrifying force instantly blocked the flames that were constantly spewing towards her from below. Of course, she only blocked the flames on her own side, and naturally paid no attention to the three people from the Heavenly God Academy. The three students from the Heavenly God Academy, who were originally planning to avoid the flames, instantly showed excitement upon seeing this scene. Then one of them charged directly at Chu Yanran with a long spear in his hand. Chu Yanran remained calm upon seeing this scene, and a fiery red spear instantly appeared in her hand. Then, the fiery red spear swiftly blocked the attack of this veteran expert from the Heavenly God Academy. How is this possible? How could you possibly possess a weapon? The veteran expert from the Heavenly God Academy, whose attack had been blocked, looked incredulously in Chu Yanran's direction and spoke. He originally thought that it would be easier to deal with Chu Yanran after she lost her weapon, but he never expected that Chu Yanran would still have a long spear, which was something he never expected. My father is the Emperor of Man, so what if I, the princess, am proficient in both spear and sword techniques? Chu Yanran was utterly disdainful upon hearing his words. She then slung the spear behind her back with one hand and looked at the veteran expert from the Heavenly God Academy, who was in the mid-stage of the Great Sage Realm with a heroic and dashing air. Chapter 736, Chu Yanran's formidable combat power, the clash between Dharma forms. Moreover, when talking about her father, the Emperor, Chu Yanran's eyes were filled with excitement and admiration. After all, Chu Fan was the only human emperor in this world, and naturally, he successfully broke through to the human emperor realm under the watchful eyes of everyone. Otherwise, many people would know that the Great Xia Empire also has other powerful figures at the human emperor level. However, few people have seen Chu Fan make a move, because as the human emperor, he did not fight against these so-called geniuses like other prodigies, and only then did he slowly become a powerful figure in the human emperor realm. Instead, to everyone's astonishment, he directly became a powerful figure at the human emperor realm. Many people are unaware that Chu Fan, this top prodigy, has already become a powerful figure at the human emperor realm. Of course, the most important reason is that he grew up too fast. Before anyone could react, he had already begun his tribulation and broken through to the human emperor realm. Therefore, many people hold this human emperor in high esteem. Upon hearing Chu Yanran's words, the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy instantly showed anger on his face, because quite a few of the top experts in their Heavenly God Academy had already fallen at the hands of the Great Xia Empire. This is why the three top experts of the Heavenly God Academy chose to attack Chu Yanran directly when they met her. Because Chu Yanran is a princess of the Great Xia Empire, they naturally chose to take revenge directly on her. Then, the three top experts looked at Chu Yanran with a hint of killing intent in their eyes. In particular, the veteran expert from the Heavenly God Academy, who was at the late stage of the Great Sage Realm, directly wielded his long sword and slashed it down into the sky. The terrifying blade energy instantly spread across the entire sky, and at the same time, the terrifying power directly attacked Chu Yanran. Upon seeing this, Chu Yanran immediately brandished the fiery red spear in her hand. Then, a fiery red vermilion bird instantly appeared behind her fiery red spear. The moment the vermilion bird appeared, the entire sky turned completely fiery red. It was as if the entire world was completely enveloped by the flames of the vermilion bird. Chu Yanran then thrust her spear forward. The terrifying power instantly caused the laws governing this sky to slowly crumble. Upon seeing this, the two mid-stage great sages from the Heavenly God Academy quickly brandished their spears. Then, two ferocious-looking giant wolves suddenly appeared behind the two of them. A terrifying force instantly swept across the entire sky. Therefore, several beams of light appeared instantly in the sky above where they were fighting. These lights made the entire sky tremble. The next second, these terrifying forces collided instantly. And then these terrifying forces collided instantly. The surrounding volcanoes also began to erupt continuously. One after another, intense flames erupted directly from the volcano. Chu Yanran's longsword was also unable to suppress the flames below, and then flew out. Without pausing at all, they went straight up behind Chu Yanran. Then it hung behind Chu Yanran. Chu Yanran was blasted tens of thousands of miles away by this terrifying force. Of course, the three experts from the Heavenly God Academy in front of him were not having an easy time either. Two of them, who were at the mid-stage of the Great Saint Realm, were directly shaken into the volcano's lava by this terrifying power. It instantly created a huge crater in the lava. The robes of these two mid-stage great saints from the Heavenly God Academy were completely burned away by the terrifying magma, making their situation extremely embarrassing. As for the late-stage great sage from the Heavenly God Academy, he was tens of thousands of miles away, his eyes filled with killing intent as he looked in the direction of Chu Yanran, who was tens of thousands of miles away. He hadn't expected that even joining forces with the other two from the Heavenly God Academy wouldn't defeat Chu Yanran. This instantly gave him a sense of urgency. It's no secret within the Heavenly God Academy that Chu Yanran and Chu Wushuang of the Great Xia Empire are of the same age. Therefore, they naturally couldn't let Chu Yanran continue to grow up at this point. Otherwise, Chu Yanran might become the next emperor of the Great Xia Empire. Without hesitation, he gripped the long sword tightly in his hands. At the same time, his aura began to slowly spread. A purple aura instantly enveloped his entire body. At the same time, purple flames began to burn the space around him. Subsequently, the aura of this powerful late-stage Great Sage from the Heavenly God Academy slowly broke through to the Great Sage Perfection realm. Of course, this was because he used a secret technique to forcibly elevate his strength to the Great Sage Perfection realm. After his aura rose to the Great Sage Perfection realm, behind the Great Sage of the Heavenly God Academy, a colossal Dharma image appeared. The Dharma form is composed of a purple ray of light. More importantly, the Dharma image was also holding a long sword in its hand that could cleave the entire sky. His face carried a terrifying aura. More importantly, the Dharma image has more than a dozen hands, which looks extremely terrifying. Chu Yanran naturally witnessed this scene as well. Without hesitation, she clasped her hands together tightly, and at the same time, the fiery red aura emanating from her body began to spread continuously. The next second, the cry of a phoenix rang out from above her head. A phoenix engulfed in flames appeared instantly above her head. Chu Yanran's Dharma form was not human. Instead, due to her constitution, it was a phoenix. So, the moment this phoenix appeared, the entire sky became extremely hot. It was as if the entire sky was being burned by this terrifying aura, becoming a true law of fire. As the Dharma image behind Chu Yanran reappeared, two terrifying Dharma image auras instantly filled the entire sky. The next second, a terrifying blade aura emanated from the back of the Dharma image of the Heavenly God Academy. A terrifying blade of energy instantly descended from the sky. It was as if the entire sky was about to be completely cleaved open by this terrifying blade energy. The phoenix behind Chu Yanran opened its enormous mouth. Then a huge flame shot out of his mouth. Wherever the terrifying flames passed, the surrounding laws were completely burned away. At the same time, the surrounding sky instantly turned fiery red. The next second, the terrifying blade energy and the flames collided instantly. The terrifying sound of the collision caused the entire sky to shake violently. Even the volcano below was completely cleaved open by these two terrifying forces. Chapter 737, Chu Yanran's Surprising Discovery. The core fire of magma deep within lava. As the force generated by the collision of these two terrifying forces fell completely onto the ground below. The ground below immediately began to shake violently. It was as if the power of true destruction had fallen to the ground. Then, the flames below were completely extinguished by the two forces. In an instant, the volcano below turned into a sea of fire, and the magma underground was completely exposed to everyone. Among them, the two great saints from the Heavenly God Academy, who were at the mid-stage of the Great Saint realm, appeared before the two in a disheveled state. However, things weren't so easy for Chu Yanran and the Great Sage from the Heavenly God Academy at this time, because their attack was already very close to the Quasi-Emperor realm. It should be noted that Chu Yanran is currently only at the mid-stage of the Great Sage realm, so such power naturally makes her feel somewhat challenged. At the same time, he landed heavily on the ground. Fortunately, Chu Yanran used the spear in her hand to steady herself. Then he slowly stood up on this sea of fire. He looked at the Great Sage of the Heavenly God Academy with a murderous glint in his eyes. At this moment, a terrifying flame appeared on the body of the Great Sage of the Heavenly God Academy. The terrifying flames burned his Heavenly God Academy robes to a terrible state. At the same time, one can sense that the power within his body has become quite strange. Even so, it was clear that the late-stage Great Sage expert from the Heavenly God Academy had not suffered any serious injuries. Instead, he stared at Chu Yanran opposite him with an incredulous expression, because he hadn't expected Chu Yanran's strength to have reached such a level. Even when he used forbidden techniques to raise his strength to the Great Sage Perfection realm, he still couldn't completely defeat Chu Yanran. This instantly made his face turn ugly. Meanwhile, the other two Great Sages from the Heavenly God Academy quickly arrived at the Great Sage's side. They all looked at Chu Yanran with a serious expression in their eyes. At this moment, Chu Yanran frowned. A fleeting hint of joy crossed his eyes, because she had just sensed a terrifying flame beneath the sea of fire where she was standing. At the same time, she also discovered that the three Great Sages of the Heavenly God Academy had not noticed the terrifying flame beneath his feet. In other words, the spiritual fire beneath her feet was not detected by the 3 experts from the Heavenly God Academy in front of her. However, Chu Yanran is currently pondering how to obtain this spiritual fire. After all, she was facing 3 top great saints from the Heavenly God Academy, and these 3 wouldn't just watch her obtain the spirit fire so easily. Thinking of this, Chu Yanran quickly transformed into a phoenix and disappeared into the world. Then she quickly plunged into the lava. The 3 students from the Heavenly God Academy were quite puzzled by this scene. They were surprised that Chu Yanran didn't choose to fight them, but instead went straight into the lava, which left the 3 of them somewhat bewildered. However, the top-tier, late-stage, great sage from the Heavenly God Academy realized what was happening at this moment. He gazed at the sea of fire below with a look of inquiry in his eyes. Clearly, he also wanted to see what was in the sea of fire below, which made it worthwhile for Chu Yanran to enter the fire directly. An extremely terrifying aura of flames. Could there be a celestial fire below? Soon, a look of shock and joy appeared in the eyes of the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy. He also guessed why Chu Yanran went directly to the sea of fire below. Without hesitation, he transformed into a purple ray of light and entered the sea of fire below. Although the other 2 great sages from the Heavenly God Academy did not know what this great sage from the Heavenly God Academy was after, they did not hesitate at all and followed the great sage from the Heavenly God Academy into the sea of fire. Soon, the 3 great sages from the Heavenly God Academy also entered the sea of fire. However, they're now a step too late. On the other side, Chu Yanran had already appeared in front of spirit fire that was emitting a terrifying light. This spiritual fire, radiating a terrifying light, is the magma core fire among the spiritual fires of heaven and earth. Although the intensity of this flame is not as great as the phoenix sacred fire possessed by Chu Yanran, but it can also be considered a spiritual creature of heaven and earth. It has a significant boost, especially for those who cultivate the laws of fire. For example, the phoenix holy fire inside Chu Yanran's body is constantly yearning to send information to her. The phoenix sacred flame now intends to devour this magma core fire completely. In this way, the phoenix sacred flame will undergo a rapid transformation. Chu Yanran did not hesitate at all after thinking about this. She quickly arrived at the side of the magma core fire. Of course, Chu Yanran also saw the 3 great sage-level beings who had followed from the Heavenly God Academy at this time. Then Chu Yanran frowned. However, as the most beloved princess of the Great Xia Empire, how could she not have a way to deal with it? Chu Yanran swiftly pulled out a crystal radiating 7-colored light from her hand, and the next second, she gently crushed the crystal. Then, the crystal instantly formed an array around her. Then he directly trapped Chu Yanran inside. Of course, it would be more accurate to say that Chu Yanran was protected within it. After doing all this, Chu Yanran ignored the 3 great saints of the Heavenly God Academy and instead looked directly at the magma and core fire in front of her. Then she sat down cross-legged and began to release her phoenix sacred flame. As the phoenix sacred flame emerged from Chu Yanran's body, it pulsed continuously. They were overjoyed to approach the magma and the fire at the Earth's core directly. Then, the phoenix sacred flame began to devour the magma and subterranean fire in front of it. Although at the beginning, the magma and the core fire put up some resistance. However, it was destined to be devoured by the phoenix sacred flame. Meanwhile, the 3 great sages from the Heavenly God Academy also arrived at this place. They looked at the phoenix sacred flame and the lava core flame with excitement in their eyes. I never expected that this princess of the Great Xia Empire would possess the legendary phoenix sacred flame. It turns out that the physique she possesses is the legendary phoenix sacred body. However, she dares to absorb the magma core fire so openly in front of us. She really doesn't take us seriously. At this moment, the late-stage great sage from the Heavenly God Academy also discovered Chu Yanran's phoenix sacred flame. At the same time, he instantly guessed Chu Yanran's physique. Then he looked at the phoenix sacred flame and the lava core flame in front of Chu Yanran with a longing in his eyes. He only needs to kill Chu Yanran to obtain these 2 top-tier flames. Chapter 738, The Excited Great Sage of the Heavenly God Academy and the Choice of the War God Temples, War Venerable. After all, if he could obtain Chu Yanran's phoenix sacred flame and the magma core fire here, his strength will be further enhanced. More importantly, these 2 flames can also enhance his aptitude. And at that time, this late-stage great sage of the Heavenly God Academy may be able to advance to the great emperor realm. Of course, even if he cannot truly grow to the level of an emperor, the improved aptitude brought by these 2 flames will still give him the opportunity to enter a different realm of enlightenment. It should be noted that the current great sage of the Heavenly God Academy can only ultimately reach the quasi-emperor realm. This shows just how important these two flames are to him. That's why his eyes showed such terrifying greed. Although the two mid-stage great sages beside him also had greed in their eyes, they both knew that it was impossible for them to obtain these two flames from the late-stage great sage beside them. Moreover, they were facing Princess de Xia of the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, they can only suppress their greed now. Then, looking at the seven-colored array in front of him, a hint of doubt appeared in his eyes. How can we break this formation now? After all, the formation set up by the Princess of the Great Xia Empire should not be so simple. One of the veteran experts from the Heavenly God Academy, who was at the mid-stage of the Great Sage realm, couldn't help but speak up. After he finished speaking, he looked around at the formation with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. He also wanted to see if they could break the formation. If they can't, they have no way to deal with Chu Yanran right now. Although this formation is supposed to protect her, isn't it also trapping her here? Upon hearing the words of the mid-stage Great Saint, the late-stage Great Saint from the Heavenly God Academy revealed an even more insane smile. Although he could sense that he couldn't break through the formation in front of him, the formation had trapped Chu Yanran inside. All they need to do is wait here for Chu Yanran to come out. As for Chu Yanran's improved strength, it didn't cause them much harm, since it was difficult for Chu Yanran to improve her strength in a short period of time. More importantly, the top experts from their Heavenly God Academy are still constantly heading here. Of course, the other top experts of the Heavenly God Academy, summoned by this late-stage Great Sage, were at most early-stage Great Sages. After all, if he were to summon an even more powerful being here, his chances of obtaining the Phoenix Sacred Flame would be even smaller. Naturally, he wouldn't do something that would harm himself for the benefit of others. So the three students from the Heavenly God Academy waited outside the formation. Among them, the two mid-stage Great Sages couldn't help but burst out of the flames. After all, they didn't have any other flames to help them. Therefore, they can only endure the burning of flames here. Therefore, the two of them went directly in the sky to wait for Chu Yanran to come out. Once Chu Yanran emerges, they can directly reach the depths of the flames and kill her. However, Yanran naturally didn't pay much attention to any of this. Right now, she was still absorbing the core fire of the magma deep within the lava. As she continued to absorb the magma and the fire from the Earth's core, the aura around her was constantly being enhanced. After all, Chu Yanran's talent was already top-notch. Therefore, it is perfectly normal for her to improve her strength after obtaining the treasures of heaven and earth. Just as Chu Yanran was improving her strength, several great saints from the Heavenly God Academy were protecting her. At this moment, many top talents within a radius of millions of miles also sensed the great battle taking place here. For example, the war god of the temple was looking at the terrifying fluctuations coming from afar with a hint of surprise in his eyes. It seems that there are true great sage-level beings fighting a great battle in the distance, and one of their auras is very similar to that of the princess of the Great Xia Empire. Could it be that the princess of the Great Xia Empire is fighting a top expert from the Heavenly God Academy? At this moment, Zhan Zun spoke with a hint of doubt in his eyes, and after he finished speaking, the look of doubt on his face did not disappear at all. Young master, if it were a battle between the princess of the Great Xia Empire and the prodigy of the Heavenly God Academy, then we cannot get involved. After all, only prodigies can participate in a battle between prodigies. However, if it were a battle between a veteran great sage of the Heavenly God Academy, then perhaps this would be our opportunity to make contact with the Great Xia Empire. Standing beside the war god were two beings emanating the aura of great saints, though neither of them could be considered prodigy. Both of them were older than the average genius, and they had come to this great emperor's secret realm to protect the war effort. Young master, what the second brother said is correct. If it is the old guard great saints of the Heavenly God Academy fighting against this princess of the Great Xia Empire, then we can indeed help the princess of the Great Xia Empire. In this way, we will make contact with the Great Xia Empire and stand on its side. The other person standing next to the war god also slowly stepped forward and spoke, with a hopeful and expectant look on his face. In that case, let's go and take a look. If it's a battle of geniuses, we won't participate. But if it's a veteran great sage from the Heavenly God Academy, then we'll probably have to trouble the two of you to lend a hand. After hearing what the two said, the war god nodded, and then cupped his hands to them again. After speaking, he looked into the distance with a hint of anticipation in his eyes. Then, he led the two great sages beside him directly towards the direction where Chu Yanran and the others were fighting. The main reason why the Temple of War chose to help the Great Xia Empire is that there are currently 3 top-tier forces on this continent, and these 3 top-tier forces are in a state of tripartite balance. Therefore, if the Temple of War gods truly want to become the top power, it must make contact with these 3 major powers, and the Temple of War Gods ultimately chose the Great Xia Empire. After all, the strength of the Great Xia Empire far exceeded their imagination, and the Temple of War Gods dared not cooperate with the Heavenly God Academy. After all, the Temple of War Gods didn't know the exact situation of the Heavenly God Academy. Moreover, the unorthodox experts of the War God Temple felt that the plans within the Heavenly God Academy far exceeded the War God Temple's capacity to handle. So they naturally had no choice but to choose the Great Xia Empire and the Xinyuan family. The Xinyuan family and the Great Xia Empire were originally on the same side. So if they could establish contact with the Great Xia Empire through this princess, they would naturally not miss such an opportunity. Chapter 739, Chu Yinran breaks through to the late stage of Great Saint, with the support of the Heavenly God Academy. Of course, it wasn't just the war god of the temple who felt the terrifying pressure erupting from that volcano at this moment. Many other prodigies around the volcano also sensed the terrifying aura emanating from it. Therefore, many prodigies know that there must be a fierce battle between top experts in the very center of this volcano. Moreover, the strength of these so-called top experts far exceeded their imagination. Otherwise, the Great War could not have generated such terrifying fluctuations. For example, Jian Yunlong from the Heavenly Sword Holy Land came here after arriving in this great emperor's secret realm. So at this moment, Jian Yunlong also raised his head and looked into the distance. As the most famous holy son of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land, and also the most talented holy son of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land, he also has the opportunity to inherit the legacy of the Heavenly Sword ancestor of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land. Therefore, there are two great saint-level powerhouses protecting him. Unfortunately, the two powerful figures at the great sage level beside him were already quite old. Moreover, his strength was only at the early stage of the great sage realm. Therefore, it is nothing special in the secret realm. At this moment, Jian Yunlong frowned and then, without any hesitation, headed directly towards the volcano. Although it is unknown who the two sides in this major battle are. But he also wanted to see who the two sides in this major battle were. If Jian Yunlong knew someone, he would naturally choose to help. Meanwhile, many other prodigies also chose to head towards the depths of the volcano. As for some exceptional talents, they chose to leave this place. After all, their strength wasn't particularly great to begin with. Therefore, they naturally choose to leave this place of trouble. Meanwhile, as the prodigies continued to gather in the direction of Chu Yinran and the others. At this moment, Chu Yinran's aura in the center of the magma also began to slowly increase. Finally, her cultivation level broke through to the late stage of the Great Sage Realm. However, just as Chu Yinran broke through to the late stage of the Great Sage Realm, other Great Sage-level beings from the Heavenly God Academy also appeared outside Chu Yinran's room. Currently, 4 individuals at the early stage of the Great Sage Realm have emerged in the Heavenly God Academy. In other words, there are now 7 great saints from the Heavenly God Academy in the center of the volcano where Chu Yinran is located. Although Chu Yinran has now successfully broken through to the late stage of the Great Sage Realm. However, she now faces 7 great sages from the Heavenly God Academy. Meanwhile, the veteran expert from the Heavenly God Academy, who was in the late stage of the Great Sage Realm, was looking at Chu Yinran with eyes full of excitement and fervor. Of course, he had no doubts about Chu Yinran's ability to break through to the late stage of the Great Sage Realm. After all, Chu Yinran is, in a way, a princess of the Great Xia Empire. Given her talent and the Earth Core fire, it's perfectly normal for her to break through to the late stage of the Great Sage Realm. Now, she is more looking forward to seeing how much her life as a phoenix can be improved after she gets Chu Yinran's help. Thinking of this, the veteran expert from the Heavenly God Academy, who was in the late stage of the Great Sage Realm, looked at Chu Yinran with a hint of excitement in his eyes. As for the other great saints of the Heavenly God Academy, they stood in the sky waiting for the battle between Chu Yinran and this powerful late-stage great saint from the Heavenly God Academy. They were also waiting for this opportunity to completely eliminate the princess of the Great Xia Empire. After all, their Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire were mortal enemies. Being able to resolve the matter of the princess of the Great Xia Empire within the secret realm would naturally be a very amicable situation for them. Moreover, they might even receive many rewards upon returning to the Heavenly God Academy after defeating the princess of the Great Empire, thus enhancing their strength. Therefore, they're naturally very excited. While the veteran experts at the Great Sage level of the Heavenly God Academy were all wearing excited expressions, Chu Yinran, who had successfully broken through to the late Great Sage stage deep within the magma, slowly opened her eyes. At this moment, she looked calmly and serenely at the veteran expert in the late stage of the Great Sage realm from the Heavenly God Academy in front of her. Perhaps at first she was somewhat wary of the 3 great sages of the Heavenly God Academy, but now she has no fear of them whatsoever. On the contrary, he remained remarkably calm. However, after sensing the great sages of the Heavenly God Academy standing in the sky, a look of doubt finally appeared on Chu Yanran's face. At the same time, he frowned as he looked at the veteran expert in the late stage of the Great Sage Realm from the Heavenly God Academy in front of him. Your Highness, Princess of the Great Xia Empire, this time you really can't escape. It's a pity that such a beautiful woman will perish here. But no matter how much it's a pity, it's your fault for being born in the Great Xia Empire. Otherwise, I really wouldn't mind sparing your life. This veteran expert from the Heavenly God Academy, who was in the late stage of the Great Sage Realm, seemed to have completely won over Chu Yanran. So, he looked at Chu Yanran with a hint of excitement in his eyes and said, after he finished speaking, he stood in the lava as if he were full of vigor. At the same time, the aura emanating from him was extremely terrifying. Of course, what's most terrifying about him right now is the terrifying purple flames emanating from his body. The moment Chu Yanran saw this person, her gaze was fixed on the purple flames on his body. Then a glint appeared in Chu Yanran's eyes. If we can obtain this guy's purple flames, then his phoenix sacred flame can be enhanced once again. Then, without the slightest hesitation, Chu Yanran activated the array around her. Then he soared into the sky. Upon seeing this scene, the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy in the sky immediately surrounded Chu Yanran. As for the veteran expert of the Heavenly God Academy in the late stage of the Great Sage Realm in the center of the magma, he also flew out from the center of the magma at this time. His eyes were burning as he looked in Chu Yanran's direction. Seeing this, Chu Yanran's eyes flashed with anger. At the same time, a fiery red spear instantly appeared in her hand, and she exuded a fiery red aura of the law of fire. She was like a female war goddess standing between heaven and earth. Then, without the slightest hesitation, Chu Yanran launched an attack directly at one of the great saints from the Heavenly God Academy in front of her. The terrifying light shot directly at the veteran expert from the early stages of the Great Sage Realm at the Heavenly God Academy. A terrifying law of fire instantly set the entire sky ablaze. The other great sages of the Heavenly God Academy who witnessed this scene naturally did not choose to show mercy. Without the slightest hesitation, they attacked Chu Yanran directly. Chapter 740, the trump card of the Heavenly God Academy's Great Saints. 10 Great Saints of the Heavenly God Academy. Upon witnessing this, Chu Yanran immediately used her fire law to completely transform her surroundings into her own world. She exuded a terrifying aura and began to continuously absorb the flames within the magma. Then these flames instantly appeared in the sky. This made the sky extremely hot. At the same time, this terrifying flame instantly blocked the attack of the great sages from the Heavenly God Academy. Even so, Chu Yanran could sense that the great saints of the Heavenly God Academy were quite powerful. Of course, Chu Yanran, who has now broken through to a higher level, can easily handle the current situation. Suddenly, the spear in his hand transformed into a terrifying vermilion bird, charging towards the several great sages of the Heavenly God Academy. A terrifying force instantly swept across the entire sky. Even before the great sages of the Heavenly God Academy could react, the vermilion bird landed on them. Then, the two early-stage great sages from the Heavenly God Academy were completely blasted away by this force. As for the other early-stage great sage, he used the terrifying laws within him to resist it. However, it can be seen that the long sword in the great saint's hand is constantly trembling. This shows just how terrifying Chu Yanran's shot was. Upon seeing this, the powerful expert from the Heavenly God Academy, who was at the late stage of the Great Sage Realm, did not hesitate at all and immediately unleashed a slash. This strike carried purple flames. The flames instantly set the entire sky ablaze. At the same time, a purple Taotai instantly appeared from the body of this powerful late-stage great sage from the Heavenly God Academy. Then, a strong aura instantly reached Chu Yanran's side. Sensing this, Chu Yanran did not hesitate at all and swung the spear in her right hand. The next second, a fiery red phoenix appeared instantly from behind him. Then, the fiery red phoenix collided with the Taotai in the sky. The two flames collided repeatedly within this terrifying power. However, in the end, Chu Yanran's phoenix, sacred fire, prevailed, and the phoenix instantly devoured the Taotai in front of it. Having done all this, the phoenix charged towards the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy without the slightest hesitation. Upon seeing this, the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy quickly swung his sword again. They used their terrifying sword energy to block the phoenix that was attacking from the sky. Of course, the main reason he was able to withstand it was because the collision between the phoenix and the Taotai beast had greatly reduced its power. Otherwise, how could the sword energy wielded by this late-stage, great sage expert from the Heavenly God Academy possibly withstand the Phoenix's attack? The other great sages of the Heavenly God Academy who witnessed this scene were also shocked. They had not expected that the princess of the Great Xia Empire would have such strength. In an instant, the 7 people stood in the shape of the Big Dipper, and then they all emitted the same aura. The next second, a huge Dharma image instantly appeared in the center of them. This enormous Dharma image also exuded a terrifying aura. Of course, more importantly, the aura emanating from Dharma image has now reached the Quasi-Emperor realm. This is the 7-in-1 formation of the Heavenly God Academy, which can be considered the strongest formation of the Heavenly God Academy. They combine the strength of the 7 of them. Therefore, the spear intent emanating from the long spear held by this enormous Dharma image has reached an extremely terrifying level. Then, the Dharma image swiftly thrust out a spear towards Chu Yanran in front of it. A terrifying power instantly swept across the entire space. Even the surrounding sea of fire began to tremble due to this terrifying power. As for Chu Yanran, she had an incredulous look on her face when she saw this scene. Even so, Chu Yanran has no intention of running away. Instead, an even more terrifying aura instantly emanated from Chu Yanran. Then, a huge phoenix image instantly appeared behind Chu Yanran. The moment the phoenix appeared, the surrounding area was completely engulfed in flames. At the same time, the phoenix Dharma image, carrying a terrifying aura, headed directly towards the spear thrust out by the enormous Dharma image in front of it. The next second, the 2 terrifying forces collided instantly. The sky shook violently at the moment of impact. The volcano below was completely destroyed by this collision. A continuous stream of fire is erupting from the ground. Chu Yanran was directly blasted away by this terrifying force. The terrifying power emanating from his body continued to emanate. However, you can sense that she's not having an easy time right now, as you might imagine. The attack launched by the combined forces of these great sage-level experts from the Heavenly God Academy far exceeded what an ordinary great sage-level expert could withstand. Even a quasi-emperor level expert must take this seriously. Therefore, Chu Yanran was naturally sent flying backward by this terrifying attack. Fortunately, she possessed the Phoenix sacred body. Otherwise, Chu Yanran would definitely be severely injured right now. However, those great sages from the Heavenly God Academy aren't having an easy time either, because their combined attack also completely dissipated into the world. Everyone was blasted away by this terrifying force. At the same time, their aura also became weak. Clearly, that attack was not as simple as it seemed. Even so, the great sage-level expert from the Heavenly God Academy still looked at Chu Yanran with killing intent in their eyes. If Chu Yanran were allowed to grow up, she would definitely be no weaker than the emperor of this era. The Heavenly God Academy will not allow the Great Xia Empire to produce another human emperor. Then, the eyes of the students from the Heavenly God Academy also showed determination. As the group from the Heavenly God Academy, their eyes filled with unwavering determination to kill Chu Yanran, began to arrive at the same time, other great sage-level disciples from the Heavenly God Academy. Soon, 3 more disciples from the Heavenly God Academy, all at the early stage of the Great Sage Realm, arrived at this place. Upon arriving here, they immediately turned their gaze towards Chu Yanran. At the same time, they also learned the main reason why they came here this time. With the addition of these 3 disciples at the early stage of the Great Sage Realm from the Heavenly God Academy, the number of great God-level experts on their side has reached 10. This instantly boosted the confidence of the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy. Then, without the slightest hesitation, they charged towards Chu Yanran once again. Chapter 741: The Siege of the Heavenly God Academy, with a steady stream of powerful reinforcements arriving. Chu Yanran, who witnessed all of this, did not show much expression on her face. Because he has always been proud of his father as the current emperor, she naturally wanted to express his pride in his father's status as emperor. Chu Yanran quickly stopped in her tracks, then gripped the spear firmly in her hands with a determined look in her eyes. His eyes were fixed firmly on the great sage-level beings from the Heavenly God Academy ahead. Then, she gripped the spear in both hands and swiftly charged towards the 10 great saints of Angel Academy. At the same time, she was also radiating a terrifying flame-like power. At this moment, Chu Yanran was determined to fight to the death with the great saints of the Heavenly God Academy in front of her. And so, a terrifying battle instantly unfolded in the sky. At the same time, the flame laws emanating from Chu Yanran made the entire sky extremely hot. It was as if they were all engaged in a fierce battle amidst a sea of fire. Meanwhile, the great sage-level experts from the Heavenly God Academy were constantly trying to use their own power to erode the power within Chu Yanran. After all, the aura emanating from Chu Yanran was in no way weaker than that of an ordinary great sage at the perfection realm. Therefore, their desire to completely kill Chu Yanran was not as simple as they imagined. Therefore, they now intend to deplete the power within Chu Yanran's body. Only in this way can they have absolute confidence in defeating Chu Yanran. However, just as these great sages from the Heavenly God Academy were hunting down Chu Yanran, two extremely terrifying auras suddenly emanated from the sky. The two terrifying auras emanating from them had reached the early stage of the Great Saint realm, indicating that two more early-stage Great Saints had appeared here. However, after these two early-stage Great Sages appeared, they did not directly attack Chu Yanran. Instead, they directly attacked the powerful experts of the Angel Academy. These two Great Sages quickly held off two early-stage Great Sages from the Heavenly God Academy. One of the Great Sage-level experts looked at the Great Sage of the Heavenly God Academy with a mocking expression. The Great Sage of the Heavenly God Academy is truly shameless. It's one thing for the older generation to bully the younger generation, but now he's even ganging up on the younger one. After the Great Sage finished speaking, he didn't hesitate at all as he thrust his spear directly at the early-stage Great Sage from the Heavenly God Academy. At the same time, the aura emanating from him was in no way inferior to that of the Great Sage from the Heavenly God Academy. As for the other Great Sage, although he did not speak, he was directly engaged in a fierce battle with another great god from the Heavenly God Academy. In an instant, two of the Great Sages from the Heavenly God Academy in front of Chu Yanran were gone. The veteran expert from the Heavenly God Academy, who was in the late stage of the Great Sage realm, was furious upon seeing this scene. He hadn't expected that someone would sabotage his carefully planned attempt to kill Chu Yanran. Then, with a hint of anger, he looked at the two Great Sages who had joined the battle and spoke. Does your Patching Heaven Pavilion really intend to fight a decisive battle with my Heavenly God Academy? His angry voice echoed throughout the entire battlefield, instantly revealing to Chu Yanran that the two people who had helped him were from the Butian Pavilion. So Chu Yanran glanced at the two Great Sages of the Heaven-Mending Pavilion and then continued her battle with the Great Sages of the Heavenly God Academy. It's not just the Great Sage of the Heaven-Mending Pavilion. Our War God Palace also wants to get involved. Just after the words of the late-stage Great Sage expert from the Heavenly God Academy fell, another powerful voice rang out from the sky. Then, the War God from the Temple of War slowly appeared in the sky, with two top experts beside him. Among the two top experts beside Zhang Zhong, one was at the early stage of the Great Saint realm, while the other had already reached the middle stage of the Great Saint realm. The next second, the War God waved to the two Great Saints beside him. Upon seeing the War Venerable's expression, the two Great Saints beside him did not hesitate at all and immediately charged towards the two Great Saints from the Heavenly God Academy. Among them, the veteran expert from the War God Temple, who was at the mid-stage of the Great Sage realm, directly confronted a mid-stage Great Sage from the Heavenly God Academy. The Great Sage, in his early stage, directly dragged away one of the Great Sages from the Heavenly God Academy. In an instant, the number of Great Sage-level combatants in the Heavenly God Academy decreased by 2. Therefore, this top-tier late-stage Great Sage from the Heavenly God Academy looked at the War Venerable in the sky with anger in his eyes. The War God did not participate in this great battle because of his insufficient strength. However, one could see a hint of amusement in his eyes as he watched the battle below. Warlord, as a member of the younger generation of the War God Hall, do you intend to lead the entire War God Hall to be an enemy of my Heavenly God Academy? Upon seeing this scene, the late-stage Great Sage from the Heavenly God Academy looked on with anger in his eyes. He then glared furiously at the War Venerable in the sky and spoke. If looks could kill, this veteran expert from the Heavenly God Academy, a late-stage Great Sage, would have already killed the War Venerable. If your Heavenly God Academy wants to start a war, then my War God Hall will accompany you to the end. But do you have a chance to go back and tell the Heavenly God Academy that we killed you? After hearing the words of this veteran expert in the late stage of the Great Sage realm from the Heavenly God Academy, the War Venerable sighed and said, at this moment, he seemed to be mocking the Great Sage of the Heavenly God Academy. And the facts were just as the War God had thought, because the Great Saint-level beings from the Heaven-Mending Pavilion and their War God Temple had joined the battlefield. Therefore, their side is now in no way at a disadvantage. Chu Yanran alone suppressed so many Great Saints from the Heavenly God Academy. They could naturally hold off the other Great Sages of the Heavenly God Academy. Moreover, the War God believed that the Xianyuan family and the Great Xia Empire would not possibly fail to come to Chu Yanran's aid. Just after the War God finished speaking, a very agitated voice came from the sky. Anyone who dares to touch Her Highness the Princess will have to get past me first. At the same time, it seemed as if an endless stream of armies was constantly arriving. Then, one after another, flames slowly approached from afar. They were incredibly fast, appearing in the sky in the blink of an eye. The next second, you could see a fiery legion instantly enveloping the entire sky. Leading the group was none other than the fiery young Marshal Xian Yuanpa, who was now looking at the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy with a hint of anger on his face. Although the army beside him consisted entirely of saint-level experts, they managed to completely seal off this area in the blink of an eye. Without the slightest hesitation, Xian Yuanpa charged directly towards the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy below. Upon sensing Chu Yanran's presence, Xian Yuanpa led his blazing fire legion directly towards this location without hesitation, and they have finally caught up. Chapter 742 Murong Zhantian's Arrival, Murong Zhantian's Choice. At this time, the fiery legion did not make a move. However, the pressure they exerted was still extremely strong. After all, every soldier among the hundreds of fiery legion members present had reached the saint level. Although they cannot defeat these great sage-level experts, they can certainly prevent them from escaping. With the arrival of the fiery young Marshal Xian Yuanpa in this great battle, another great sage-level expert from the Heavenly God Academy in front of Chu Yanran was taken away by Xian Yuanpa. More importantly, the great sage-level expert that Xian Yuanpa took away was a mid-stage great sage. Therefore, the only great saint-level experts that Chu Yanran will face from the Heavenly God Academy now are that late-stage great saint and 4 other early-stage great saints. It can be said that Chu Yanran is now free from any pressure. It was only a matter of time before she could defeat the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy in front of her. Just as Xian Yuanpa led the blazing fire legion to arrive, a series of equally powerful auras appeared in the sky once again. Then, many other outstanding talents appeared in the sky. However, none of these prodigies are particularly strong. The strongest is probably Murong Zhantian, one of the 4 young masters of the demonic sect. Well, after all, he is a Saint King level being. Murong Zhantian, one of the 4 young masters of the demonic sect who appeared here, nodded to Zhan Zun before slowly turning his gaze to the center of the battlefield. Then he looked in the direction of the war god with a strange expression. I never expected that your war god temple would choose to help the great Xia Empire. Aren't you afraid of the Heavenly God Academy? Then, Murong Zhantian looked at Zhan Zun with a hint of doubt in his eyes and asked. As one of the 4 young masters of the demonic sect, he naturally realized that the other 2 great saints who were fighting against the great saint-level experts of the Heavenly God Academy were great saints of the War God Temple. So he was somewhat surprised. He hadn't expected the Temple of War to choose to help the great Xia Empire. Does it matter to your demonic sect who my War God Temple helps? After hearing Murong Zhantian's words, Zhan Zun spoke directly to Murong Zhantian, and after speaking, a look of disdain appeared in his eyes. After all, their Temple of War was originally a top power in this universe, and they naturally had their reasons for wanting to help the great Xia Empire. After hearing Zhan Zun's words, Murong Zhantian reacted, but it was clear that his brows were tightly furrowed. He knew that if the war god truly helped the princess of the great Xia Empire overcome this crisis, then the relationship between the princess and the war god temple would become very friendly. It's even possible that the princess of the great Xia Empire might help the Temple of War to take action against these demonic sects. Upon thinking of this, a thoughtful look instantly appeared in Murong Zhantian's eyes. The only way for him to solve this problem now is to help the great Xia Empire or the Heavenly God Academy. If the great Xia Empire is to be helped, this princess of the great Xia Empire is unlikely to help the Temple of War to deal with their demonic sect. Helping the Heavenly God Academy would mean that if the great Xia Empire were to attack them, they could seek help from the Heavenly God Academy. However, because of the Heavenly God Academy's 2 previous actions, many forces were unsure of what the Heavenly God Academy was really thinking. After all, if the Heavenly God Academy simply had the idea of joining forces with the Supreme Beings in the Forbidden Zone, they would not be able to join the Heavenly God Academy or become its friendly forces. After all, most or even all of the powers on the mainland cannot tolerate the existence of those Supreme Beings within the Forbidden Zones. After all, their ancestors had fought against the Supreme Beings in the Forbidden Zone, so it was impossible for them to cooperate with the Supreme Beings in the Forbidden Zone. Having considered this, Murong Zhantian made his decision. Now, all he can do is help this princess of the great Xia Empire. Although the princess of the great Xia Empire has now gained the upper hand. However, they can still help the princess of the great Xia Empire and gain her trust. Without hesitation, he then gave a look to the 2 powerful figures from the demonic sect behind him, both of whom were at the great sage level. The 2 powerful figures from the demonic sect reacted instantly upon seeing Murong Zhantian's gaze. Without any hesitation, they headed straight for Chu Yanran's battlefield. Then they quickly arrived at the center of the battlefield in front of Chu Yanran. Without the slightest hesitation, they attacked the other two early-stage great sages from the Heavenly God Academy. In an instant, the two early-stage great sages from the Heavenly God Academy discovered their presence and quickly withdrew from the battlefield. Soon, among the great saint-level beings from the Heavenly God Academy in front of Chu Yanran, only the late-stage great saint and two other early-stage great saints remained. Therefore, Chu Yanran's pressure has been greatly reduced. In the blink of an eye, Chu Yanran suppressed the three great saints opposite her. At the same time, there was a hint of mockery in her eyes. After all, at the beginning, these great sage-level experts from the Heavenly God Academy wanted to completely annihilate her. But unexpectedly, the scene suddenly reversed in the blink of an eye. The late-stage great sage from the Heavenly God Academy was furious upon discovering this scene. He never expected that everything he had planned would be disrupted by these outside geniuses. Instantly, his eyes flashed with anger as he looked towards the War God Temple's War Venerable and Murong Zhantian, one of the four young masters of the demonic sect. His eyes also held a fierce killing intent. After all, they were not surprised at all that the Xianyuan family and the Butian Pavilion had joined this great battle. After all, the Xianyuan family and the Butian Pavilion had already joined forces with the Great Xia Empire, so it was perfectly normal for them to join this great war. Unexpectedly, the forces represented by Murong Zhantian, one of the four young masters of the demonic sect, also joined this great battle. In addition, the Temple of War also joined this great battle. This instant caused the late-stage great sage of the Heavenly God Academy to harbor resentment towards Murong Zhantian, one of the four young masters of the War God Temple and the demonic sect. However, he's currently holding a grudge against the two of them. However, this great sage from the Heavenly God Academy also knew that he had no chance to attack the two of them now. So he immediately turned his gaze to Chu Yanran in front of him. Meanwhile, Chu Yanran was still attacking him. Chapter 743, Chu Yanran slays the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy and unexpectedly gains the netherworld purple flame. A phoenix engulfed in intense flames suddenly attacked him. The terrifying flames instantly turned the entire sky into a sea of fire. This forced the late-stage great sage from the Heavenly God Academy to retreat and avoid this terrifying attack. However, this late-stage great sage from the Heavenly God Academy was able to dodge this attack. However, the other two great sages at the early stage of the Heavenly God Academy beside him were unable to dodge this attack. After all, there is a significant gap between their strength and Chu Yanran's. So how could they possibly dodge this attack so easily? The attack then landed directly on the two of them, although the two chose to dodge when the attack was about to hit them. However, the terrifying force still landed directly on the two of them. Then they were completely annihilated. The terrifying flames instantly engulfed the two of them. The two early-stage great sages from the Heavenly God Academy didn't even have a chance to react before being mercilessly devoured by the flames. More importantly, the flames emitted by this phoenix carry the sacred flames of the phoenix, and these flames have been enhanced. Therefore, the power of this flame naturally far exceeded the range that the two great sages of the Heavenly God Academy could withstand. Thus, this terrifying flame completely burned the two great sages of the Heavenly God Academy to ashes. They didn't even have a chance to react before they perished on this battlefield. The geniuses outside naturally saw all of this very clearly. Then, they looked at Chu Yanran with disbelief and complicated expressions in their eyes. Clearly, they hadn't expected that the princess of the Great Xia Empire would be so powerful, instantly annihilating two early-stage great saints. Even at this moment, Murong Zhantian and Zhanzun were staring intently at Chu Yanran. Clearly, neither of them had expected Chu Yanran's strength to reach such a terrifying level. Although the two of them had guessed from the beginning that Chu Yanran would definitely win this big battle. But at that time, they did not expect that Chu Yanran could win so easily. Moreover, they were able to so easily eliminate these two great sages from the Heavenly God Academy. It can be said that all of this was beyond their imagination. However, Chu Yanran's strength completely put their minds at ease. It should be noted that if the Heavenly God Academy is ultimately victorious in this great battle, then the princess who supported the Great Xia Empire will also be implicated. They might even perish on this battlefield. Fortunately, the one with terrifying combat power right now is this princess of the Great Xia Empire. The late-stage great sage from the Heavenly God Academy who had already left showed a hint of regret in his eyes after seeing Chu Yanran so easily kill two early-stage great sages from the Heavenly God Academy. However, he soon emitted a very strange purple light. The purple light quickly caused his body to burst into flames. The next second, a terrifying dragon suddenly appeared behind him. Moreover, this terrifying dragon was engulfed in purple flames. Clearly, This purple dragon was revealed after its flames had completely burned out. Without the slightest hesitation, the giant purple dragon charged towards Chu Yanran. Upon seeing this, Chu Yanran formed hand seals. The next second, a vermilion bird appeared behind her, and the entire space shook violently after it appeared. At the same time, this vermilion bird also carried terrifying power, directly attacking the late-stage Great Sage from the Heavenly God Academy. The next second, the two enormous objects in the sky collided. The moment these two colossal objects collided, the sky was completely engulfed in a sea of fire. What's even stranger is that one direction of this sea of fire is fiery red, while the other direction is purple. It was as if two forces were constantly colliding within this sea of fire. Finally, two figures slowly emerged from the sea of fire. At this moment, Chu Yanran held a long spear, her eyes filled with murderous intent as she looked at the great sage from the Heavenly God Academy in front of her, and a fierce flame was still burning on her body. The long spear in her hand was radiating terrifying flames. It seemed as if it could burn everything in the heavens to ashes. Meanwhile, the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy, who was opposite Chu Yanran, was extremely pale. At the same time, a huge dent can be seen on his chest, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. This shows that the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy was at a disadvantage in his attack against Chu Yanran. At this moment, Chu Yanran obviously did not choose to keep this great sage of the Heavenly God Academy. She gripped the spear tightly in her hands, and then a huge figure appeared behind her in an instant. The figure also held a fiery red spear in its hand. The next second, the fiery red spear seemed to pierce through the entire space-time continuum and fell directly from the sky. Even for a true great sage at the peak of his realm, it would be extremely difficult to withstand this spear strike. Moreover, the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy in front of him was only at the late stage of the great sage realm. Although he tried his best to use the terrifying flames within his body to resist this terrifying attack. However, the spear in the sky still pierced straight through his body. At the same time, a fiery red flame continued to burn inside the body of this great sage of the Heavenly God Academy. The next second, this great sage of the Heavenly God Academy could only perish here in such a desolate manner. After he fell, a purple flame was left behind at the place where he perished. The purple flames continued to flicker. It was as if this purple flame possessed its own life. I never expected that the legendary Netherworld purple flame would exist in the Heavenly God Academy. It seems that this guy's death was not in vain. At this moment, Chu Yanran stepped forward without hesitation and accepted the ball of Netherworld purple flame, her eyes filled with excitement. If she can completely refine this Netherworld purple flame, then her strength will be further enhanced. It can be said that Chu Yanran has already obtained what she wanted by entering this secret realm. Even if she doesn't get any other treasures later, it's still a pretty good experience for her. After putting away the ball of flame, Chu Yanran turned her gaze to the other great saints of the Heavenly God Academy. She hadn't forgotten the attacks she faced from the other top students at Tianxue Academy. Chapter 744, The Great Sage's Trump Card from the Heavenly God Academy. Yang Qilong of the Yang family makes his move. The other great saints of the Heavenly God Academy all wore expressions of fear and apprehension after witnessing Chu Yanran kill 3 of their great saints. If it weren't for the geniuses around them, they would probably have left this battlefield long ago. Of course, there's another crucial reason. They're currently being held back by other great sage-level powerhouses in front of them, so they're naturally unable to leave this secret realm. Chu Yanran, on the other hand, first targeted the mid-stage great sage from the Heavenly God Academy in front of Xian Yuanpa, since this guy had attacked Chu Yanran from the very beginning. Therefore, Chu Yanran naturally needs to get rid of him quickly and completely. Then, Chu Yanran, holding the spear in one hand, slowly walked step by step towards Xian Yuanpa. With each step she took, it was as if she were walking into the heart of this mid-stage great sage from the Heavenly God Academy. It could be said that this mid-stage great sage from the Heavenly God Academy was filled with regret at this moment. Even now, he's thinking about how to escape quickly. But how could Chu Yanran possibly give him that chance? Chu Yanran quickly arrived beside the mid-stage great sage from the Heavenly God Academy, and then the spear in her hand instantly thrust towards the great sage. The next second, countless fiery red spears appeared in the sky. These fiery red spears instantly filled the entire sky. Then, one after another, spears made of flames came straight at the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy. A terrifying force instantly swept across the entire sky. Upon seeing this, Xian Yuanpa quickly swung his spear forward and was sent flying backward. He looked at the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy with a hint of mockery in his eyes. At this moment, the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy naturally had no time to pay attention to Xian Yuanpa. He quickly used his weapon to block the rain of gunfire falling from the sky. At the same time, he was also thinking about how to leave this battlefield. Then, taking advantage of the moment when no one was paying attention, he quickly crushed a jade pendant in his hand. Then, a pitch-black space instantly appeared around him. The mid-stage great sage from the Heavenly God Academy looked at the dark space beside him with a hint of joy upon seeing this scene. Because now he can escape this battlefield as long as he enters this space. Xian Yuanpa and Chu Yanran, who witnessed this scene, also frowned. Because Xian Yuanpa and Chu Yanran no longer have time to stop this mid-stage great sage from the Heavenly God Academy. After all, this guy already has 1 foot in this space. In particular, Xian Yuanpa's eyes even carried a hint of anger. He never imagined that his carelessness would allow even a mid-stage great sage from the Heavenly God Academy to escape. However, just as this mid-stage great sage from the Heavenly God Academy was about to step into this void, an extremely terrifying pressure came from the sky. The next second, a force directly ripped the mid-stage great sage from the Heavenly God Academy from the void. The terrifying force threw him out of the air. Then it appeared directly beneath Chu Yanran's barrage of gunfire. The great sage at the mid-stage of the Heavenly God Academy, still in a daze, perished under the barrage of gunfire. He didn't even have time to defend himself before being completely overwhelmed by the terrifying barrage of gunfire. The others, seeing this, all looked up at the sky. A young general stood in the sky, wearing a black and red armor, his face calm. Yang Qilong of the Yang family pays his respects to Your Highness the Princess. Then he quickly came to Chu Yanran's side, bowed to her, and spoke, his eyes showing a serious expression. He was Yang Qilong from the Yang family generals. Since none of the Yang family generals had broken through to the Great Emperor realm, they were naturally allowed to enter this secret realm this time. Therefore, the Yang family generals naturally entered this secret realm to protect their princess and their prince. Upon seeing that the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy was about to escape, Yang Qilong chose to take direct action. Yanran has met Uncle Yang. When Chu Yanran saw Yang Qilong, she looked at him with a smile and said, although Yang Qilong is a general of the Great Xia Empire. However, there was no war in the Great Xia Empire during this period, so the very active Yang Qilong often followed Chu Yanran and Chu Wushuang. Therefore, Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran naturally had a very good relationship with Yang Qilong. Therefore, both of them would call Yang Qilong Uncle Yang, but this was all under normal circumstances. If they were in the imperial court, they would naturally address Yang Qilong as General Yang. Your Highness, if you want to kill them, then go ahead. With Qilong here, they cannot escape. After hearing Chu Yanran's words, Yang Qilong smiled at her, then looked at the other great saints of the Heavenly God Academy with a calm, yet murderous gaze. His words sent chills down the spines of the great saints at the Heavenly God Academy. They had no idea that such a terrifyingly powerful figure was accompanying the princess of the Great Xia Empire. After hearing Yang Qilong's words, Chu Yanran nodded to him and then charged directly at the great saints of the Heavenly God Academy without any hesitation. At this moment, Xian Yuanpa transformed into a little fanboy beside Yang Qilong, and then he looked at Yang Qilong respectfully and said, Xian Yuanpa, the Xian Yuan family greets General Yang. You can see that his eyes are still sparkling with little stars. Xian Yuanpa, the young marshal of the Xian Yuan family, has considerable talent. He may have the opportunity to join the Great Xia Empire and become a general under His Highness Wushuang in the future. After hearing Xian Yuanpa's words, Yang Qilong turned around and glanced at Xian Yuanpa before nodding to him. Yang Qilong had naturally heard of Xian Yuanpa. He thought Xian Yuanpa had good talent, and that if he joined the Great Xia Empire, he could definitely become a great general under his peerless prince. Moreover, Yang Qilong knew that this guy had always wanted to join the Great Xia Empire, which is why he said that. Thank you for your praise, General Yang. I, Xian Yuanpa, will definitely become the #1 general under His Highness Wushuang. Xian Yuanpa was very excited after hearing Yang Qilong's words, and then he held his spear and said with a determined look, after all, Chu Wushuang doesn't have any real generals by his side right now. If he becomes Chu Wushuang's follower, he will definitely become Chu Wushuang's #1 general. Just like Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong under Chu Fan, Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu were considered Chu Fan's top generals. It should be noted that Chu Fan had 8 generals under his command, and Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu were 2 of them. Chapter 745: The Strength of the 7 Generals of the Yang Family, the Annihilation of the Great Sage of the Heavenly God Academy. Of course, although the 7 generals of the Yang family were not among Chu Fan's 8 generals, they were still considered 7 top-tier junior generals under Chu Fan. Therefore, they are very famous throughout the Great Xia Empire or even the entire world. After all, all 7 junior generals under Chu Fan of the Great Xia Empire had reached the quasi-emperor realm. Among them, the most powerful was Yang Lulang of the Yang family, because Yang Lulang's strength had reached the astonishing quasi-emperor perfection realm and was only one step away from the great emperor realm. If one wishes to break through to an alternative path to enlightenment, then Yang Lulang of the Yang family has already achieved that. However, Yang Lulang did not choose to break through to the otherworldly realm. Instead, he chose to break through to the great emperor realm. This is why Yang Lulang of the Yang family has not yet broken through to the great emperor realm. Even so, the other major generals in the Yang family are also quite capable. For example, Yang Qilong of the Yang family, who also reached the perfect realm of quasi-emperor. Of course, the Xianyuan family and the Butian Pavilion knew all this, because ever since that great battle, the Xianyuan family and the Butian Pavilion had maintained a very friendly relationship with the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, they naturally knew the strength of these generals in the Great Xia Empire. The top experts outside could only name these generals, but not their strength. For example, among all the experts present, only the experts from the Xianyuan family and the Butian Pavilion knew Yang Qilong's strength. Of course, even the 2 great sages of the Butian Pavilion might not know Yang Qilong's strength. After all, only the core disciples of the Butian Pavilion truly knew Yang Qilong's strength. Take, for example, Xian Yuanpa's relationship with the Xianyuan family. Meanwhile, Chu Yanran charged directly into the midst of a group of experts, and together with the experts who came to support the Great Xia Empire, she quickly wiped out all the great saints of the Heavenly God Academy. In the blink of an eye, all the great saint-level experts from the Heavenly God Academy perished on this battlefield. It could even be said that they now have no chance to escape, because Yang Qilong has blocked all their escape routes. No matter how powerful they are, how could they possibly compare to Yang Qilong, a quasi-emperor at the peak of his realm? As the battle ended, the geniuses present gasped in shock, because they never expected that such a simple battle for prodigies would result in the deaths of so many great sages. It should be noted that even in the holy lands outside, beings at the great sage level are among the most outstanding. As long as those quasi-emperor level ancestors do not take action, great sage level experts are the most powerful beings. This is why there aren't many great sage level experts in a holy land. But now, Chu Yanran has killed 10 great saints. All of this was quite shocking to them. After seeing that Chu Yanran had killed all the powerful figures from the Angel Academy at the great sage level, Yang Qilong slowly retreated. His figure vanished into the void in an instant, as if he had never existed. However, all the geniuses present knew that Yang Qilong, this top expert, had always existed, so everyone looked at Chu Yanran with a respectful expression. Chu Yanran, on the other hand, looked at everyone present with great calmness. At this moment, the War God Temple's War Venerable slowly walked up, his eyes filled with respect as he looked at Chu Yanran and spoke. The War God of the Temple greets Your Highness the Princess. Although the War God Venerable held a very high status within the entire War God Temple, he was still far inferior to Princess Chu Yanran of the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, the War God of the Temple is naturally showing some respect. Thank you for your help this time, War God Temple. If you need anything in the future, please contact me, Princess. When Chu Yanran looked at Zhang Zun, her eyes didn't show much expression. Instead, she looked at Zhang Zun leisurely and spoke. After she finished speaking, her gaze turned to Murong Zhantian, one of the 4 young masters of the demon clan on the other side. This statement was clearly very useful to Murong Zhantian as well. Upon seeing this, Murong Zhantian respectfully cupped his hands in greeting to Chu Yanran. After doing all this, Chu Yanran turned her gaze to Xian Yuanpa beside her, and then asked him with a hint of doubt, Did you see my royal brother after entering the secret realm? As soon as Chu Yanran finished speaking, Xian Yuanpa, who was not far in front of her, reacted. He came to Chu Yanran's side and then spoke to her earnestly. I haven't seen His Highness Wu Shuang since entering the secret realm. After saying that, Xian Yuanpa shook his head. After hearing Xian Yuanpa's words, Chu Yanran shook her head helplessly. She hadn't expected that she wouldn't be able to find her brother after entering the secret realm. However, for Chu Yanran, her own elder brother should be able to see the ultimate emperor's inheritance. More importantly, her elder brother also has a powerful quasi-emperor at the peak of his realm by his side. Therefore, he naturally believed that his elder brother was not in any danger in this world. Moreover, if danger were to arise, Chu Wuxuan would definitely have top-tier experts by his side, since both of them are currently under the attention of powerful figures at the Red Dust Immortal level from the Great Xia Empire. Unless it's a true Immortal level expert who makes the move, they can escape very easily. Even if a true Immortal level expert were to make a move, they would have time to resist. Meanwhile, at the same time that Chu Yanran was killing the great saint-level expert from the Heavenly God Academy, in a desolate and uninhabited area, three top talents are continuously moving forward. If Chu Wuxuang and the others were here, they would immediately recognize these three top geniuses as the three great sage-level top geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy. At this moment, the three of them seemed to have a map and headed straight ahead. Not long afterward, they finally appeared outside a magnificent-looking palace. This palace looks enormous. Of course, the most important thing is that there are many stone tablets standing prominently in front of this palace, and these stone tablets are engraved with the names of many famous people. This includes Xianyuan Wudao from the Xianyuan family. Of course, the strongest name engraved on this stone tablet is Xianyuan Wudao, and there is no one stronger. The woman from the Heavenly God Academy, the same Heavenly God Academy prodigy who was almost killed by Chu Wuxuang, was holding a spiral symbol in her hand. At this moment, the pointer above the spiral is pointing directly at the palace in front of us. Clearly, they got here using the spirals in their hands. Chapter 746, The Magnificent Palace. Chu Wuxuang encounters the Phoenix statue. Meanwhile, the other two great sage-level geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy beside him leisurely raised their heads and looked at the enormous palace in front of them. You can see that their eyes also held a hint of joy. Clearly, they had come specifically for the palace in front of them. Then one of the men slowly stepped forward, looked at the palace in front of him, and spoke. Is this the place where the great emperor's inheritance is located in this secret realm? Why hasn't the great emperor's inheritance been activated even though we've already come all this way? After he finished speaking, the man had a puzzled look on his face, because he didn't expect that the emperor's succession hadn't even started yet. They have already successfully found the palace where the emperor's legacy is passed down, so the emperor's legacy should be activated now. The other man was also somewhat surprised after hearing his words. He then leisurely looked around the palace, clearly searching for a way to unlock the emperor's legacy. He soon discovered a huge stone gate in front of the palace where the great emperor's legacy was passed down. More importantly, there is a huge indentation in the very center of this massive stone gate. At this point, the huge dent became quite noticeable. Perhaps to activate the legacy of an emperor-level powerhouse, we must find the key to unlock the palace that holds the emperor's legacy. Then the man looked leisurely at the recessed area in front of him, where the stone door had been opened, and spoke. Of course, all of this was his own guess, but his guess was probably right, since this was all that could be seen here. Therefore, to unlock the emperor's legacy here, one must need the key to the emperor's legacy. But among the group of people who came in, who has the real key to the emperor's inheritance? Even our Heavenly God Academy doesn't have the key to the emperor's inheritance, let alone other forces. The woman finally spoke, and as she spoke, she frowned and looked into the distance. After all, they considered their Heavenly God Academy to be the most powerful force in the entire universe. But even so, they had not yet unlocked the key to the great emperor's inheritance. If that's the case, how could other forces possibly possess the key to the emperor's legacy? The geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy looked puzzled and curious about the location of the key to the great emperor's inheritance. The key to the emperor's legacy doesn't necessarily have to be brought in from outside. Perhaps the key to the emperor's legacy in this place is inside the secret realm. The man who had just spoken then looked leisurely into the distance and said, his eyes still showing a hint of anticipation. Although their Heavenly God Academy is not lacking in the inheritance of great emperor-level powerhouses, being able to obtain the inheritance of a great emperor-level powerhouse would naturally enhance their strength. Now we should set up an array to wait for the arrival of His Highness Wuxuang of the Great Xia Empire. Only by completely annihilating him in the secret realm can we feel at ease. Another man then slowly stepped forward and spoke, a hint of murderous intent flashing in his eyes. Clearly, he had already decided to kill Chu Wuxuang of the Great Xia Empire. He even now desperately wants to kill Chu Wuxuang completely. It seemed that only in this way could he relieve the hatred in his heart. Then, the other two nodded after hearing his words and began setting up the formation with the man without any hesitation. Meanwhile, Chu Wuxuang was unaware that the students from the Heavenly God Academy were already waiting for his arrival. Chu Wuxuang is currently heading into the distance after defeating that ancient beast. He soon arrived at a very ancient forest. More importantly, the trees here are enormous. Each tree seemed to be a towering giant. Chu Wuxuang looked extremely small in the room. However, he did not fly into the air. Instead, he calmly walked forward on the ground. Soon he entered a place that seemed like a fairyland. The place was filled with ethereal energy, and one comfortable aura after another flowed into his body. Upon seeing this, Chu Wuxuang smiled and walked forward without hesitation. He soon arrived at a very harmonious and quiet place. More importantly, a row of stone formations stood in front of him, and standing prominently in the very center of the formation was a lifelike phoenix. However, it is clear that this phoenix has lost all vitality. It stood there between heaven and earth as if it had been weathered. However, the power of law emanating from his wings was still extremely powerful. I never expected to encounter a phoenix here, and more importantly, this phoenix was at least at the quasi-emperor level in its lifetime. It seems that this great emperor's secret realm is indeed not as simple as I imagined. Chu Wuxuang glanced at the phoenix in front of him and instantly saw through the phoenix's true strength in its lifetime through his golden eyes. Then, he looked at the phoenix in front of him with a hint of surprise. However, what Chu Wuxuang saw more at this moment was the semicircular golden jade pendant at the phoenix's feet. The jade pendant appears to carry profound laws. Chu Wuxuang only glanced at it before realizing that this jade pendant was not as simple as she had imagined. So he quickly walked forward, intending to take the jade pendant away. However, the moment he stepped into the formation, he seemed to appear in another world. At the same time, a strong killing intent was also present in the surrounding area. More importantly, the scattered stones on the ground began to slowly fly up. Soon, these huge stones instantly formed a giant in front of Chu Wuxuang. The giant stone monster instantly turned its gaze toward the shop window. His two enormous eyeballs emitted a terrifying red light, and then a mechanical voice slowly emanated from his body. Trespassers will be killed. As a mechanical voice slowly emanated, the enormous stone monster hurtled directly towards Chu Wuxuang. A terrifying force hurtled rapidly toward Chu Wuxuang. Upon seeing this, Chu Wuxuang leaped high into the air and unleashed a punch without hesitation. A golden light burst forth from his body in an instant. Then he collided directly with the stone monster's giant, sky-piercing hand.